Austin City Limits second weekend in Austin, and so we have got quite the audience going on this afternoon here.
Yeah, are any of you here for ACL Fest? You just
we got a couple of hand raised.
So they're just here for us.
No. Well, most of them. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Atheist Experience. Today is Sunday, October 14th, 2018. I'm your host, Tracie Harris, and with me today is my co-host, John Iacoletti.
Howdy.
Howdy. The Atheist Experience is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a Texas nonprofit educational organization dedicated to promoting separation of church and state and positive atheist culture. I want to invite everybody to join us for dinner after the show at the ACA studio located at the Free Thought Library on Koenig Lane. We're having spaghetti and meatballs, or for people who don't do the meat thing, we're just having spaghetti. So take your choice. And also one cool thing that's going on today, we will not have an after show, but the reason is that we're going to have, right after the Atheist Experience, a show called Truth Wanted. And there's going to be also a call-in show that deals with street epistemology and exploration of truth and what people believe, why they believe it, but in a more kind of context of epistemology as opposed to like the atheist-theist conversation. Mm-hmm. And that is going to be hosted by Objectively Dan. And he's going to have a guest host, Drew McCoy, who is also known as the Genetically Modified Skeptic on YouTube. And that is, as I said, going to air directly after this episode of the Atheist Experience. And you can also tune in to their regular scheduled shows on Friday at 6 p.m. featuring discussions with, like I say, a street epistemology emphasis. So if that's your thing, that might be a great show for you to watch. And again, it's going to be call-in, and they are going to have the same number. In fact, I've got the Truth Wanted mug. I think we both have our Truth Wanted mugs. And just FYI, again, it's the same call-in as this show, so it'll be directly afterwards, and we invite everybody to stay tuned and watch for that.
Sounds good. I think it's the premiere tonight, too. The official premiere, anyway. So good luck with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Dan's somebody I've known for a while, and really good guy, so I think he's probably going to be worth a watch. Awesome. All right, so anything on your end?
No, I didn't bring anything to talk about today, so we can go straight to calls.
No, we can't, because I have something to say.
Well, that's awesome.
Just to let people know, I am going to be speaking October 20th on Saturday in Houston. The Houston Humanists have asked me to come out, and they're having a panel discussion, and information for that is at the blog. The location, times, I think it's 1 to 3 p.m. And
the blog is at
freethought./AXP.
freethoughtblogs.com.
You got it.
Okay.
He's got it. Free Thought. Is it Free Thought Blogs?
freethoughtblogs.com/AXP.
Okay, that's it. So John's got it. He's on me. That's a good thing. And the other thing I wanted to say was that I watched a movie on Netflix called The Witch. Have you seen this thing?
I have not.
Wow. So the movie is creepy, but not for the reasons that the movie is supposed to be creepy. Most of the film, I was distracted by the portrayal of American colonial theistic colonies and how really cultish and scary they are. And it's a kind of an interesting thing because people talk about like how Australia was kind of founded on the penal colonies. They came out of like the British Empire. And then we were all the cults that were too extreme for prime time, all the religious wild people that couldn't fit in anywhere else, came to the United States before it was the United States just to make colonies here, and basically to do things that you couldn't do back where there was laws. And it's very enlightening, I think, to see the level of self-defamation, like the level of denigration and dehumanization that goes into these early Protestant religious roots here in the United States. And it explains a lot about how people still today, especially the religious conservatives, continue to see people as in a really negative way, making really negative assessments and negative assumptions about human nature and how people behave. And I was really struck by some of the scenes that portrayed the children doing their sort of rote prayers and verses, and the way that everybody would sit there and talk about how they were depraved and completely worthless and vile and without any grace and without any goodness in them and just completely bent on sin and wickedness like 24/7. And all of it is extremely biblical. But it was kind of impactful, I think, to see children, saying these things. And then to have the parents kind of helping them and coaching them to like learn to say these things. And there's, I don't want to give spoilers, but like I said, I'm not really giving spoilers on much of the plot as much as just the trappings, the setting that it's in is what's really was to me kind of revolting and horrific. There's a particular dialogue that goes on throughout the film where there's an infant that dies. And so the older brother is he might be around 7 years old or so. And he's extremely freaked out about, is the baby going to go to hell? Because if we're all born into depravity and born into original sin, if none of us have any goodness in us, and if we only are, if we only get to heaven through God's grace and not through any deserving of our own, then how do any of us know we're going to heaven? That's what the boy is asking. And in the meantime, the infant's mother is won't sleep because she's praying 24/7, asking God, please don't send my infant son to hell. Don't let his soul be in hell. And that is an endless endeavor because there's no way to ever know.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like she can never rest from worrying that the infant's soul is being tormented eternally because of God's whim and because no child born deserves anything good. It was, the boy himself starts to have all kinds of anxiety and fits as a result, and the father is watching it, and he is tormented on behalf of his family, but can't comfort them because he can't tell them.
Yeah.
From a biblical standpoint, he can't say the baby is in heaven. And so he has to sit there and basically try to come up with reasons why I'm sure it's okay, trying to comfort his family, but there is no comfort to offer in this religion.
Yeah, I think I think our culture and our society carries a lot of that baggage even to the present day.
I agree.
This idea that we're inherently wicked and we need God's grace to get out of that. I think that kind of defines American culture, at least as from the beginnings, and there's still a lot of that. If I were to have brought a topic, it would have been political, and I'm trying to stay away from that on this show because we're 501c3, but I hear it today, and a lot of the political rhetoric that's going around is still that idea that, that we're inherently wicked and we need...
Yeah. Well, and when it comes to entitlement programs, for example, right? So you have this idea we should help people, and then there's these other people that are like, oh, no, if you offer help, everyone will take advantage of it. Everyone will abuse it. Everyone will just, want to suck up our tax dollars and be lazy, and no Protestant work ethic in play.
Right.
And so it's, so there's all these horrific, dehumanizing Protestant ideas that birthed our nation from the European standpoint.
Right.
That I remember a friend of mine who did a paper on Jesuits in Canada, and when they came in and they saw people, the indigenous populations that they encountered weren't beating their children. And they could not believe that there were people who were not beating their children.
Yeah.
And they were just like, how do you expect to raise decent human beings if you're not beating them? And when they tried to explain it and tried to convert everyone, they found that the adults were extremely hard to convert, right? Because they already had ideas.
Yeah.
So they just killed them all, took the children, brought them into the Jesuit missions, and beat them and raised them up to be, good Christian children. Yeah. So it's a really brutal past that we have, and the roots of our religious past are, born of brutality. I remember there was a program that used to be on where they had people who agreed to live in settings from different time periods. Mm-hmm. You would have to kind of stick to the historic reality of what these people, and they did a Victorian one, and they did some that were early colonial America. And in one episode, there was a pastor who was all excited because he got to be the pastor or the leader of an early Christian colony here in the U.S. And so he was so excited. And after a while, when there was one family that decided they didn't want to go to church anymore, he had to deal with that. Now, the show was not able to deal with it in the ways that the early colonies would have dealt with it because you can't kill people on TV. So they were suggesting that he put them into stocks,
right?
And he was like, I can't do this. I can't do it. And ultimately, he just had to say, you know what, this was a bad idea. I was so excited that I was going to get to play the pastor for this town, and now that I see what that really means, he was completely offended by it as a modern Christian. He was a little bit more liberal, I think, in his views. But I think we have a very romanticized concept of our history. I remember when McElroy was the school board chairman, and they wanted to do talk about Calvinism more, the influence of Calvinism on the nation. And one of the things that I had said at the time was, I would very, very much like that, but I would like it to be an honest discussion of what Calvinism has done to this nation, which I think is completely horrific. I think the influence of that, of the religion, early Christian religion on the current climate has been nothing but damaging. And so I'm kind of sad that the people that want to teach it are, still looking at that hideous, dehumanizing experience as some sort of a positive influence on human beings in this country, instead of seeing it as something that needs to badly be shed.
They want to whitewash it and kind of romanticize it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and some of them still probably do have those same views, to some degree.
Yeah.
So they probably don't see it as like horrendous. They probably see it as some beautiful truth. It's disturbing. Anyway, I was disturbed. If you would like to get a window, if you're not in the United States, and you're one of those people that says, what is wrong with you people in the United States? Why are you so messed up? Why do you seem to hate human beings? You can watch this movie, The Witch, to get an idea of what our past was like.
Now, how does Witch play in? Is it talking about
Well, I don't want to tell people about the plot.
Oh, okay.
All right, but, there's, let me just say that, there's some things that happen, and you can sort of interpret it how you want to interpret it, whether or not there's actual enchantment and witchcraft happening, or whether there's just bad things happening. It's sort of, they play both sides of it sufficiently that you could probably come to your own conclusion. I think ultimately they do sort of answer it a little bit bluntly, but I still think that you can watch it and sort of make up your own mind to a certain degree.
I've learned a little bit about the Salem witch trials and having gone to Salem, and that was horrific in itself, just what they did there. But that was probably pretty typical of the time as well.
Yeah. These weren't, and you weren't always, people that were executed weren't always executed as witches. You could be executed, banished as a heretic. This particular movie is about banishment, but, they could easily have just been killed.
Yeah.
That being said, let's go ahead then and hit some calls. I think I went a little bit longer than I intended to, but we'll start out this with my namesake here. That we've got Tracie in California who wants to get over a fear of hell. Is that correct?
Yeah. Hi, John. Hi, Tracie.
Hello.
Hi, Tracie.
Hey, guys. Thank you for taking my call. I actually called a couple of weeks ago and spoke with Matt and Mandisa about the struggle I'm having with the Bible. And it's funny you opened with that fear of hell because, that is what I'm calling about. See, guys, I've always believed that God was a kind, loving being. That's what I was taught. But, the more I investigate and the more I talk to my sister who is atheist, the more I'm realizing how brutal he actually is. And I'll be honest, it scares me to say that, because I've had it drilled into my head that to question is to commit blasphemy, and that is a direct ticket to hell. I find myself just trying to swallow what the Bible tells us, but...
Well, the Bible tells you God is vengeful and jealous, right? And angry. And... doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It does.
Just making sure.
And what's funny? I had told Matt and Mandisa, I'm one of these Christians that I have not sat down and read it cover to cover. I just digested what the preacher told us every Sunday, that God is love. And, I had atheist friends tell me that just what you said, Tracie, about him being vengeful. And I'm like, oh, no, that's not true. I refuse to believe it. Yeah. But then I actually looked it up, and yeah, you're right. this whole concept of a loving God sending his children to burn for eternity, you know, I have a son, and I would never hold his hand over a flame to punish him.
Would you ever make up a plan to save somebody else that you get to control the whole plan that entails your son being beaten and then crucified to death?
No.
Okay.
No.
Just checking.
Absolutely not. If that had to happen, I would take his place. There's no way. And see, that's something else. I mean, I could take up your whole show, and I don't want to do that. but things like that I just cannot reconcile in my own mind. And, you know, a couple of weeks ago, Matt told me to leave my grandma alone, but I had the opportunity to talk with her. And she gave me a show-stopping answer, that being, listen, whether you believe these things or not, or you agree with them or not, everybody's going to get what's coming to them in the end. And it was like, drop the mic. That was it. I had nothing to say to that.
Everyone's going to get what they deserve in the end?
Yes, ma'am.
What does that mean?
And please, I know my grandma is 90. She's a wonderful woman.
Well, I mean, what does that mean to you? I mean, you know your grandma. What do you think it means?
Right. Coming from my grandma or the Bible itself?
I guess either. Is she saying is she saying that this is her takeaway from the Bible, or is she saying regardless of the Bible, this is her belief?
Or is she threatening you to stay in line?
Right.
Because that's what it sounds like.
Get me, yeah.
I'm seeing it more like grandma's kind of laying down this karmic justice thing, that she's saying that, you know, in the end, things are all going to work out. Like, you know, good people are going to get good things, bad people are going to get bad things. I mean, but I don't really know what that means in the context of any sort of eternal heaven or eternal hell, or like, I know, speaking for myself, I've done things in my life that I probably regret and would do differently now that I'm older. And I've, you know, done some things that I think are good things. And so I'm not sure if somebody was like, you're going to get what you deserve. I'm not sure what that would be, right? Like, what do I deserve? Because there's some crappy things I've done, and then there's some pretty good things I've done. So how do I get judged? If it's on my merits, how do I get judged? And,
you know, my grandma, what's the word? She adheres to a very traditional view. And that is, and I hate to say this because I love my grandma and I don't want to make people angry with her.
No, it's cool.
But thank you. It's either, if you believe in Jesus, you're good to go. You're going to paradise. If you don't, you're going to hell.
Yeah, that's normal. Right? So that's a normal Christian view. I don't think grandma's off the mark. But that's not the same as saying everybody gets what they deserve. Because what she's basically saying is that, you know, the horrible person who does think of the most evil things you can think of and say that person, you know, comes to Jesus in the moment before death, they go to heaven. And then somebody who struggled and tried to do the right thing all their life doesn't ever hear about Jesus, and they die, and then they go to hell.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not about deserve, right? People aren't going to end up getting what they deserve.
Well, from that point of view, you do deserve it if you don't believe in Jesus as your savior. So it doesn't matter what else you do.
Right, but what I'm saying is that when grandma says it's all going to work out, you know, it all works out like in some kind of weird evenness where everything like evens out. It really doesn't. I mean, from any kind of a standpoint that would make sense to a person, the idea that you can be a horrific person and go to heaven, or you could be like a really, really good person who tried to devote yourself to, you know, not hurting anybody and to making the world a better place, and then you can still end up in hell. That's a heck of a system, right?
Is that what grandma thinks, though? What is?
Well, she said grandma says if you believe in Jesus, you go to heaven.
No matter what else, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I wanted to talk to her more, but at that point she's like, leave me alone. I'm watching my Hallmark channel.
Oh, okay. All right. So, I mean, do you find grandma's answers satisfying or not? Like when you heard her answer, did you walk away saying, that sounds good?
No.
Anyone can say that. You could say that about Muhammad, too. I mean, it doesn't make it true.
Right. I know. And, you know, I kind of expected that from my grandma. I'm surprised she let me even get the question out, because sometimes I've been talking about things, and not necessarily my grandma, but even my mom, who is not really, none of us are really religious. That's the thing. We just don't believe in God. But I was talking with my sister once again, who is atheist, about something. I think it was Eric from Talk Heathen, who said that Jesus or God basically, what was it he said? Sacrificed himself to himself
for
the rule he made.
Right.
And my mom heard that, and she's like, you two girls better be careful. And immediately that fear went through me that, oh, crap, I'm questioning. I better stop.
I guess my question is this. What would you think of a God who says, I don't want you to actually investigate things?
I would think there goes the concept of free will.
I mean, if you were, let's just say, I mean, I know they're like, oh, human being can't know what it is to be God. But let's say you're God. Would you tell people don't look into stuff?
No.
I mean, what's the point of that?
But if I was if I was a human who wanted you to accept things unquestionably, then I would.
Yeah. I guess what happened to me when I left the church was I had to come up. I had to sort of think about things, because I was taught all this hell stuff too. But then the Bible fell apart, right? Like I began to investigate where the Bible came from, and that all fell apart. And so then I was just like, all of this is up in the air, right? Unfortunately, God existing didn't go into that basket. I wish it had. It could save me some time. But the whole concepts of heaven, hell, all of that, Jesus, it all went into question. And so I had to stop and think. And I just thought, I can only be the most honest person I can be. And if there is a God, and if that God wants me to know about that God, and if there's something that's required of me that the God wants me to do, right, a plan for my life or something like that, then the most honest thing I can do is just seek as hard as I can. Like investigate, look at what anybody has to say about it, question everybody, question myself, let them question me. Yeah. And I just went on this whole thing of just like, I need to get to the bottom of this. Not to the bottom of whether or not a God exists, but to the bottom of what is God? What am I dealing with? Because my whole definition of all of that fell apart when the Bible fell apart. And so I had to look at this and say, what am I dealing with? What is God? What does God want for me? Does God want me to know and find God? And if God wants me to know and find God, and I make every effort to devote myself to knowing and finding God, and that God doesn't make it possible, you know what I mean? It's like that. At some point, the God has to reach down and sort of do the God's part in giving you a hand and meet you kind of halfway there. Because you can't, you don't know what you're doing. You're flying blind. And so what I finally thought was, I'm just going to do an honest search. And if there's a God, that God has to respect that. And if they don't respect it, there's nothing I can do about it, right? If I'm dealing with a God who is going to not accept me when I'm doing my very best and I'm being as honest as I can and I'm searching as hard as I can, then I'm pretty much screwed. And there's nothing I can do about it. So I didn't worry about it after that. I was just sort of like, I'm just going to do the best I can. And if that's not good enough for God, and somebody says, one day I'm going to stand before God, well, then I have to stand before God and say, I'm a human being. I did the best I could. I tried as hard as I could. And it's up to you what you're going to do with me at this point.
Yeah.
That's all you can do.
Right. Both of you, John and you, I don't think either of you are bad people based on what I've seen on the show. And even as a Christian, I know that my book says that, but I don't think you deserve to burn in hell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very
We don't either.
Well, yeah, you don't. And that's what I'm having a lot of trouble with because, guys, on one hand, I'll be honest, I desperately want to believe in God. I do. I want to believe that this life isn't it. I'll get to see my loved ones again, and paradise is going to be awesome. But at the same time, I'm afraid that if I stop believing in hell, I might stop believing in God. And it really, really gives me anxiety saying that. Because, I don't know. It just scares me because what if I'm wrong?
What if you're wrong about all kinds of things? I mean, if you want to know whether or not you're wrong, the best thing you can do is look into something, right?
Yeah,
I mean, investigating it
Mm-hmm.
and getting information. If you wanted to know if you were wrong about some kind of environmental impact, what would you do? You'd research it, right?
Research it, yeah.
If you wanted to know what kind of car you wanted to buy, well, what if I buy the wrong car? Well, you need to figure out what's important to you in a car, and then what would you do? You go online, you research it.
Right.
You in order to know to get out of the trap of what if I'm wrong, the best avenue is to get as much information as you can get about a thing. And that's going to help you. And then in the end, if you research and there's just not sufficient information, let's say I researched the hell out of these cars and there's just 3 of them that are just neck and neck. Well, at that point, it just doesn't matter, right? It's like I'm just going to have to pick one.
Pick one, yeah.
And so for what you're doing, if it reaches a point where you look into it and you don't find these answers that you want and you can't nail it down, at some point you just have to say, I don't know, right? I don't know. And there's things in life we don't know, and there's nothing we can do about it. And like I said, if there's a God that's going to send you to hell for not believing in him or her or it, at a point when there's not sufficient information for you to make a decision that's informed and solid, I don't see how you could be blamed for that. But if you are blamed for it, pretty much you're dealing with a God that's going to blame you for shit. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. Don't worry about it, because there's nothing you can do to sway a God that is not reasonable and makes no sense.
If there was a God, he could provide you with more information to help you decide, and for some reason chooses not to. But I never grew up believing in a God, so for me it's a little bit academic. But I can understand the fear is drummed into you from an early age that you don't question this stuff. It's blasphemy. You better be careful, like your grandma said, or you better, or like your mom said, and then that prevents you from just thinking about it because of that fear. Yeah. And like Tracie said, I can't believe that a God would deliberately set you up to, give you a brain that has reason and wants to investigate things and learn how things are and how things work, and then punish you for using it. So that's kind of how I look at it. If I were, a theist who was struggling, I would think, what does the God I believe in act like that?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to, I could recommend a book to you, Misquoting Jesus by Bart Ehrman.
Okay. Misquoting Jesus.
Yeah, it might help if you had a grasp of the New Testament and where these books came from and how this book was put together. Okay. That might help you decouple some of the religious trappings from your concept of God. It doesn't necessarily, it's not going to make a decision for you on whether or not a God exists, but it can help you gain some understanding about whether or not you should be putting your trust in the Bible.
Right. Yeah. Well, no, guys, I know our time is winding down, and I really, really appreciate you talking with me and the work that you do. I am going to continue researching because I'm not sold either way just yet. I don't disbelieve, but I don't know if I.
Hey, that's fair. Just keep looking. I mean, just look until you're satisfied.
Okay. Thank you. And if it's okay, I'd love to call back and talk again.
I think that's fair. Feel free to post at our blog too.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Tracie.
Have an awesome day.
You too.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's a good call. Yeah. I like honest calls.
Just keep thinking. Keep exploring.
Okay, and now we're going to go to Joaquin in Baytown, Texas. You have evidence of gods in ancient books, or you want to talk about that as a topic?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I've been doing research for many years on Asian scripts. There's a elite group that they got books online, and I have them all. And this group, they're tested and translated all the scripts to contact the gods, angels, archangels.
So there's a group that has written some books that helps people contact archangels?
No, they translate them.
They translate books that are about contacting archangels?
Yes, and angels. and other entities.
Okay.
What were they translated from? Where did they come from?
Well, some of them from private collections, and they're, I guess, based on their history, they've been experimenting through geometry, and I don't know if I can say the name of the books because I don't want to give them publicity.
Oh, so you're not?
Can I?
Well, I mean, it depends on what we're talking about here. Are you saying that you don't want to give them publicity, or you would like to, and you are asking if you're allowed?
Hey, yeah, if I'm allowed to give them
if the books have a name, I'm sure people would like to look this up. So yeah.
Okay, so okay. They wrote about 17 books. They've been out for a few years, but nobody want to share this info because we humans, we're like really greedy. We don't want to let people know how do we contact.
Yeah, because God knows religious stuff doesn't ever spread and get proselytized. People like to keep that close to the chest, right?
No. Keep secret, greedy, selfish.
Right. I'm just saying that religious texts have a way of sort of seeping out.
Okay. These systems, these books, they've been tested on atheists, believers, and pretty much anybody can access these angels and the archangels, because one of the secrets is through geometry. But the names of the books are Sigils of Power.
How do you spell that?
Damon. You can look at Sigils.
Sigils?
S-I-G. Yeah, Sigils. S-I-G-I-L-S.
I-L-S. Of power?
Of power, yes.
Okay. And
that that is for one of the authors. He got another one. Well, he got like 17 books.
So is this one guy translating, or I mean, what is
this? It's a group.
Okay, so the group is putting out the information, and then somebody's translating it.
And
they already did since the 70s. Now they're putting it for online for sale.
Okay,
they're selling the secret.
Who is the source of the information?
Who's the source?
Yeah.
Well, they don't put that much stuff on pictures. I guess they want to remain secret. But their group is called Gallery of Magic. They're on Amazon, and you can check their reviews, their testimonials, and people been doing good things to angels and also bad things. That's why nobody wants to share it, because you can actually hurt, or actually you can even send people to their death.
This may be one for the blog. I mean, I'm not sure that we can really get too into this, because I'm having a little bit of trouble sort of ciphering out this info. But if you would like to, I would invite you to go to the blog, right, for the show, which is freethoughtblogs.com/AXP for Atheist Experience. And when you first post, there will be a delay because somebody has to go in and moderate it. I'm usually pretty good about moderating the first few days. I'll go in and check after the show and sort of make sure the comments get through. And then after that, you may have to wait a few days because people aren't always going to the blog and moderating.
Yeah.
But once you get a comment moderated, once your first comment goes through, you'll be able to post at will. So after that, you can post and you don't need anybody to moderate it. But you'll have a little bit of delay on your first post. But I would really appreciate it if you could write this up a little bit, like sort of put some of these titles, put the name of the group, maybe add some links. You were saying that there's some reviews on Amazon. This would be a really good thing to sort of post at the blog for people to be able to go and research themselves and look into themselves. I think this would be information that other people would be interested in that watch the show.
Mm-hmm. Because it's hard to get into it in depth here if there's 17 volumes, but I'd be interested in where they come from. What was the original language? Are these people just not sane? Are they translating these things? Because Joseph Smith translated golden plates too. At least he said so.
Right.
But did they really exist? Or, do these things exist in some form before they were translated that we could look at? I would ask, being a skeptic, I would ask a whole lot of questions about what these things are and how do you know they're true.
Right,
Okay.
but that could get really deep, though, on a show where we're just sort of hearing about this.
Yeah.
So I really think the blog is a better location for the information because you can actually sort of, put it down in a orderly format, sort of, a sort of table of contents style where you're like, here's the information, and then people can go and look into this and report back on what they find. It's almost like crowdsourcing this information, if you will, like crowdsourcing the research. I think that would be a good idea if you're okay with that.
Well, I think that's a little too much.
Well, I mean, maybe start with just a few titles, the name of the group, and a couple of Amazon review links. And then maybe just post a paragraph about your thoughts on it.
Okay. Well, they actually answer you when you call even their names by clicks or a little noise here and there, but you can actually hear them as soon as you call the name.
So if I call a name, can you give me a name?
No, but I'm saying you have to look at the geometry. Because
this is the part that I need somebody to look at, or I need to look at later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
we could call out a name right now on the air and see if we hear any clicks.
No. You have to see their symbol. That's the access to them. You got to look at the symbols, and then they will reply. Like another ones. And not only them, but another authors are coming forward too and explaining or they're selling their books on, So
I mean, now it just sounds like we're not really equipped to test this in studio. I mean, we don't have really because the calling out the name we'd be happy to do, but you're saying that there's like another step involved here with the geometry, and that's why I'm kind of saying maybe this would be a good thing to crowdsource at the blog. If you could just, like I said, if you could just go to the blog and add a couple of titles. The name of the group,
link, if there's a link,
a couple of links to these Amazon reviews, and just say that you were Joaquin from Baytown, Texas, who called about the ancient books. I think that people at the blog would be super interested in kind of looking this up and getting more information about it.
Okay. So, like I said, you can even test it yourself, and they'll respond to depending on what.
Well, I'd like to, but apparently we can't do it without the geometry in front of us. So
yeah, so if we get more details, we can check into it and try it.
We definitely is. This doesn't sound like anything we're going to be able to get to the bottom of like on the phone during this show. So that's why I'm saying if we can get that information out, maybe we can look at it a little bit, and then have a little bit better discussion on it later or something like that.
Right.
Okay, well, okay then.
All right. I mean, I'm serious about inviting you to post this at the blog, and if anybody's watching and any of what Joaquin is describing sounds familiar, if you're familiar with it, feel free to go ahead and post what you know about it at the blog. I'd really like more information on this.
And if you're watching on YouTube, there's a YouTube chat going on too, and I think if you post some links there, the people participating there could also look into it as well. So, but I'd appreciate you doing it at the blog because I can't see the YouTube chat right now. So either one or both.
Okay. So I mean, I appreciate it. But like I say, it doesn't sound like anything we can do much with on the phone because we're not apparently don't have the materials that are required to run a test right here.
Right.
But I appreciate the call.
You can buy the book.
Yeah, but again, we need the links.
Test it at home.
Yeah, so if you send the links to where these books are obtainable from.
Yeah, go ahead and post to the blog.
Or better yet, if you want to buy some and donate them to the Free Thought Library, we could have copies here. We do take donations, yeah. And we're a charitable organization that lends books out to people. So if you want to send a book to us, that would be great.
Okay, I'll check it out. Well, thank you for taking the call.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, appreciate just you throwing it out there. Thanks very much. All right, so now we're moving on to Brandon in Australia, who wants to talk about Kalam cosmological argument for God. Hi, Brandon. You're on with John and Tracy.
That's where my eyes glaze over.
Hello. How you guys doing?
Hey.
Good. How are you, Brandon?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. I've seen you guys have heard the argument before.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Would you like me to go over it or for the audience?
If you want to go through it and sort of address why you think the criticisms fail, that would be good.
Okay, well, I suppose I'll start just stating the argument. Whatever begins to exist as a cause, the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. And then we can work on that and unpack what it means to be a cause of the universe.
Or what it means to begin to exist.
Right.
Yeah, or what it means to be, what it means to begin to exist. So do you guys deny either one of those premises?
I don't know. I don't really, I wouldn't be able to weigh in on those.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that either of the premises are true.
Okay, well, why do you think so?
How do you know whatever begins to exist must have a cause?
Okay, so I think, first of all, it's very self-evident that whatever begins to exist has a cause.
But see, the problem is I've heard information, like people have talked to me about things like virtual particles. And when I get into things like that at the quantum level, I don't know what to make of them, and that's kind of beyond my ken. So I'm unable to...
I can explain to you, because I've definitely looked into it. A lot of people claim, things can come out of nothing because we see it in quantum physics and the quantum vacuum and whatnot. But it's been shown countless times that the quantum vacuum is not nothing.
Right. But wait a minute though. Wait a minute. I don't think that there is such a thing as nothing.
Well, exactly. That's what the first premise is saying. It's saying that.
Well, no, the first premise says whatever begins to exist, and I'm saying that there's no such thing as I don't understand what nothing even is. So I'm not convinced that there can be nothing. So I don't know that anything begins to exist in the way that that nothing existed and then something existed. I don't think that's possible.
So you don't think something can come out of nothing?
I don't think there can be nothing. I'm not sure a creator is required because I don't think there can be nothing. How would there be nothing?
So you think necessarily there has to be something?
I could be wrong, but I'm open to hearing why I would be wrong, but I don't understand what nothing is a nonsense concept to me.
It's not anything.
What does that mean?
So nothing. It means not anything. It means absolutely not anything.
How could it be?
What do you mean? Nothing?
Yeah, how could nothing exist?
It's not something that can physically... You can't call nothing something that can exist.
Okay, so nothing can't exist.
Well, you're using a play on words.
No, I'm not. I'm asking you to explain this to me because it doesn't make sense to me. I'm not doing a play on words. I'm saying, can nothing exist?
Nothing is a negation. That's all the word is. So it's...
Can nothing exist? Can nothing exist?
Yes.
Then how is it not something if it exists?
Well, that's a very weird question. Can nothing exist?
I don't know how else to ask it. I'm saying that I don't think there can be nothing, and you're saying that you think that there can be nothing, and I'm saying then how? Because if it exists, it's something. And if it can't exist or doesn't exist, then I guess it would be nothing, but then it can't exist. So how can there be how can nothing be? To me, that statement that nothing can be or nothing can exist or there can be nothing makes no sense.
I'm a little confused. It's sort of pretty strange how you're confused about that point. I think it seems pretty evident that you can either have something or nothing.
How can you have nothing?
How can you have nothing?
Yeah. How does that even make sense?
There's nothing contradictory about having nothing.
How can there even be nothing to have? What is it? And even that question makes no sense because how do you ask what is nothing? Because if it is, then it's not nothing.
Okay. Let's get off that point because I don't think...
But it's an important point because if we're going to say that things begin to exist, and I'm saying I don't know how things can begin to exist because I don't know how that something wouldn't exist. How can something that doesn't exist? It doesn't even make sense.
So you're pretty much saying that things necessarily have to exist.
I'm saying I don't understand. I could be wrong, but I do not understand how nothing can exist. It seems to me that if there's
When you're on a talk show, you got to understand these big arguments. You got to understand how it's possible and that something can exist, and it's not necessary that something always exists.
Then then you're saying that nothing exists?
That's clearly not what I said from that statement.
No, but are you saying that nothing could exist?
Yes.
Then how is it nothing?
If it exists.
An existent thing is a manifesting thing. If nothing is manifesting, then it's something.
Okay, I think you are getting confused between the word nothing. Nothing is not an actual thing. You can't say nothing exists. Like, what stopped the car? Nothing. Oh, nothing stopped the car. Oh, then that nothing, you can't describe it in that sense. Nothing is a negation. So it's.
But you're saying
anything.
You're saying not anything, and I'm saying, do you think that there's a state of not anything that can actually be? And if so, how? How could nothing be?
How. Well, before the universe, that's how.
But if it is being, then it's not nothing.
I didn't say it was being.
I said, how could nothing be? And you said before the universe. So if it was being before the universe, then it wasn't nothing, it was something. Well, then what was it?
Before the universe, it was not anything. There was no being. There was not anything.
But how do you know that there was a time before the universe that...
But what does that mean? How could there be not anything?
I didn't say be.
What is it?
There was not anything.
What was there?
You keep saying, what is it? I keep telling you, it's not anything.
Could not anything be? Could there be a state of not anything?
No, not in terms of the sense be.
Right.
You keep saying being.
Right, because I'm saying I don't believe that nothing can be. I don't think nothing can exist. I don't see how that's even possible. If it is, then it's something. Even if it is a negation of all things, that's something. That's an attribute.
No, and it's not an attribute.
You just described it. Would you recognize it if you saw nothing?
No.
You wouldn't recognize it if you saw it.
There would be nothing. You would no one would be.
It would be nothing. That's what I keep saying. Doesn't make any sense. How could there be nothing?
Okay, I don't know. Okay, this is a very, very simple concept of nothing, and I don't know.
I don't think it's as simple as you think. I think a lot of people think it's simple, but when you try to nail it down, you have to describe it. And if you're describing it, that means you're describing something.
I'm not describing something. I'm describing a negation, as I've said quite a few times.
A negation is something, is it not?
No, it's not. It's a negation.
So a vacuum, for example, if I say, well, that's a negation of matter, but a vacuum is something.
Well, yeah, no. If you say a vacuum is the absence of anything, then that's a negation. But if you say it's the absence of matter, that's a negation of matter, but there could still be other stuff in the vacuum, like energy. So it's
But you're saying that there is a state. There is a state in which no things.
It's not a state.
What is it?
It's nothing. I don't understand how you can't.
How do you know that this condition of nothing ever existed?
It can't exist. that question makes no sense. And that's what I'm saying.
Because you're saying existence.
I'm not saying I know for sure, but I was going to prove it with the universe beginning to exist, and what preceded before that needed to be nothing. I was going to argue that.
I don't think that there can be nothing.
Okay, you've said that quite a few times.
I'm going to keep saying it because it's nonsensical. You're saying that there was a state before the current universe where there was nothing.
Well, I'm saying it's possible that.
It's not
the explanation.
It's not possible that there was nothing.
Okay, so
it would be something
before the universe.
I don't know. I don't know what was before the universe. No one, as far as I know, knows what was before this incarnation of the universe.
I don't even
believe the universe began to exist at a point.
I believe that this incarnation of the universe began to exist because I have, some trust in physicists, but not because I have firsthand understanding of what the hell they're talking about. But the point is, nobody knows, as far as I'm aware, what was there before. But to say that there was nothing there before, to me, is a nonsensical, self-contradicting statement.
I didn't say there was nothing.
So then there was something.
Well, I'm actually arguing that there was a God before then. Okay, you got confused with the term nothing, so I was trying to...
Okay, so you do... so in fact, you think there was something?
If there was a God, there was something.
Yeah, I never once said that there's definitely nothing before the universe.
Then I don't even know what that whole discussion was about. So we all think that there was probably something. And then it's just a question of whether or not you want to label that something as a God or just as natural processes or the unknown, right? I mean, which really it is. It's the unknown. So you're calling this God, this unknown, the God.
No, I'm saying the universe began to exist a finite time ago. It was 14-point-something billion years ago.
In its current form, maybe.
Yeah, that's what they tell me.
That's what they say.
Yeah, most cosmologists and theoretical physicists say about the universe. That it had a beginning, an absolute beginning of space-time.
Do we trust them? Do you trust them?
I would say I trust them for the most part. It's pretty, and looking at the evidence, it's pretty overwhelming that it did begin to exist.
Okay. What is their view on whether or not before the universe there was a God?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm going to talk about.
Well, that's what you're going to talk about. What do they have to say about it?
A lot of them are agnostic about it.
Okay, do you trust them?
No, because they choose to be, not necessarily on that point.
Okay.
They just choose not to investigate on that because,
okay.
I mean, when you talk about...
So you don't think cosmologists are investigating or at all interested in trying to figure out what occurred prior to this universe existing? They're not interested. They're not researching that.
Some are.
And don't you think that would be an interesting thing for them to be researching? Like, don't you think that they would be interested in that?
You would speak to a philosopher with regards to that.
Why the hell would I speak to a philosopher about physics?
Well, it's not physics. It
is physics. No, it's not metaphysics. I don't know that metaphysics even exists.
Well, okay, sure. Well, I'll just agree to disagree with you on that point.
Okay.
And continue to discuss before the universe.
Okay, so we already have a problem with your first premise. Now your second premise was
that it has a cause.
The universe began to exist.
Right.
The universe began to exist. Okay, how do you know that?
Well, he's talking about this incarnation 14 billion years ago, the thing that physics describes.
Right, but I'm not a physicist, but if all the matter that's in our current manifestation of the universe was in a singularity, doesn't that still exist?
Technically, no. Technically, a singularity is an infinite point. So it essentially piddles out to zero, which is nothing. And that's pretty much what the Big Bang describes. But there's other evidence that suggests that there was an absolute beginning. I mean, we got from the second law of thermodynamics is evidence.
Stephen Hawking wrote that we can't really talk about what happened before the Big Bang.
Yeah, because time didn't exist either.
Thank you.
Yeah, because the Big Bang describes up to a boundary point. And
yeah, but he basically said that at the time he wrote the essay, I don't know because I don't follow physics, but he wrote an essay saying that we really can't say what happened before Big Bang, that you might as well just cut those events out of the picture because there was at the time he wrote the essay no way to investigate it.
Yeah, because there was no theory of quantum gravity to describe.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just know that's what the man wrote.
Yeah, but there was a new theorem that came out, the Borkuth-Vilanken theorem.
Okay.
Which doesn't presuppose the quantum theory of gravity and proves that any universe that is on average expanding, that is ours, needs to have an absolute beginning a finite time ago in the past. Okay.
Does it say what happened before that?
No, it just proves that that our universe that we live in has to.
Right. I think what Joaquin was saying was that there was no way to make an informed statement about what happened in the time before that. And what you're describing, that's why I asked, is what do they say about the time before that? And you're saying, no, they're just basically talking about since.
Okay, we can talk about what... Okay, well, what I'm trying to get at is that the universe began to exist a finite time ago, and there needed to be a cause for what brought it into existence. It couldn't have just popped into existence.
Why not?
Okay.
I don't know.
What?
I have no idea, because this is like well over my pay grade.
Why does it have to have a cause? Well, we go back to your first premise again. But
Okay, I think you guys are just maybe a little confused about the science and stuff behind it.
No, I'm not confused. It's like that's why my eyes glaze over with Kalam every time, because you're making these premises that you can't really demonstrate are true, and then you make a conclusion.
Okay,
you said it's self-evident. Everything that begins to exist has to have a cause.
Yeah.
And I asked you how you knew that, and you said it's self-evident. Well, when people say self-evident, that to me means they really don't have any evidence.
Okay, have you experienced anything coming into existence without a cause?
Well, everything that I experience is not...
I've never experienced a universe come into an existence.
Yeah.
I'm talking about just normal experience. The experience...
Right, but this is not a normal experience, I guess is what we're saying.
Aren't you shifting the burden of proof, though, by making me come up with an example of something that didn't have a cause?
It's like the black swan thing, right? Like there's no black swans because we haven't seen one. And then we saw them, and it's like, oh, guess what? There's black swans.
That's not true. I've said it's self-evident, and then you said, no, it's not. And I'm asking you to tell me why it's not, right?
Well, you make a claim that everything that begins to exist has to have a cause, and then I say, well, how do you know that? And you say, well, have you ever seen something that didn't?
Yeah, I think limiting it to John's personal experience is not necessarily demonstrating the universality of a thing.
I'll argue it more then. Okay, everything in our universe comes into existence without a cause, and that's been demonstrated through science multiple times, and everything in all the evidence that we have in science has never falsified that truth. That things don't...
So what causes a virtual particle? What is the cause of a virtual particle?
Quantum laws and energy. So the cause is energy and
I mean, I know there's energy there, but I've always heard that they're not acting in a causal way. I mean, what you're telling me is different than what I've been told by other people.
They're random, which may seem non-causal, but they're still causal. They're very causal.
Then what's causing them?
We have certain laws that describe their interactions with the energy, and that's what causes it. I mean, it has a cause at the quantum level, right? They've done numerous experiments on this. It's probably one of the most self-evident things that we have around us. We don't expect things to randomly pop into existence around us. I mean, it's quite self-evident that when we put so many eggs into a basket, we'll expect that many eggs to come back out, right? It's pretty self-evident that whatever is there doesn't just pop into existence.
I'm not sure what Tracie's looking up, but when we get into quantum physics, that's way beyond my pay grade.
All right. So, do you still deny that?
Like I said, I'm not convinced that your premise is true.
And I guess at the end of the day, what hangs me up is how come the same physicists who are paid to make a life of investigating this have not come to the conclusion that you've come to?
I haven't come to which conclusion are you talking about?
Well, you're talking about Kalam, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't that get to God?
I haven't concluded there yet.
Okay, so we're not getting to God from this.
Not as typically described.
So we're talking about something that in the end, at the end of this conversation, it results in and may or may not be a God.
Well, it gets pretty close to, but not the typical definition.
Okay, and the physicists agree with you about this result?
Some do.
But this is published, and it's, you would say that it's, what is it, like, this is a standard view of physicists, right?
Very well known.
Huh?
Kalam cosmological argument is very well known.
Right, but is it a published? Is this physics? Is this published? Is this peer reviewed?
There's been a lot of peer reviewed papers written on this.
On Kalam?
The Kalam.
Great.
Yeah,
In physics journals?
I've read a few over the past couple of years. I mean, I don't have them on me. I'm sure I can maybe after the show write in this blog you guys talk about and post a couple of them.
My view of Kalam is that it's just trying to define a God into existence, and it's a God that nobody who believes in a God actually believes in. Like, is that the God you believe in, or do you believe in a particular God that does things and interacts with us in our daily lives?
I'm a Christian.
Okay, so you're trying to convince us. So Kalam isn't what convinced you to be a Christian, is it?
Not exactly, no.
Not exactly.
Well, partially. I mean, there's lots of arguments. The Kalam cosmological arguments can show that there was a cause. If you accept, given that you accept it, like I do, it shows that there's a timeless, immaterial, spaceless, very powerful personal cause of the universe, but it still doesn't get to omniscience and all that other stuff. And you get to the moral argument to get to...
There's a personal cause to the universe. Now, you're saying this is physics.
Yeah, well, I can... Okay, well, I understand that part's a little controversial, and I can explain why. Do you want me to explain why I think...
Well, no, what I want to know is this what physicists believe? Like, is this the what do you call that? The consensus among physicists that what you're telling me is correct?
I'm not sure.
Would you like to talk to physicists and maybe get them on board with what you're saying? Because if you could convince physicists, that would actually mean something, right?
I've read a couple of physicists who have engaged in this argument. I don't know about...
That's fine, but I mean, you're basically saying that this should be demonstrable in a way that, I mean, there's no reason this shouldn't be consensus among physicists, right? I mean, if it's so demonstrable, self-evident, why wouldn't this be consensus?
I'm not talking about the conclusion. I'm talking about one of the premises.
Well, I'm talking about the conclusion because what we're talking about here is the beginning of the universe, right? So this is a question for physicists. And so my question is, why do you think physicists are not yet convinced of what you're trying to convince us of?
The premises is where the physicists interact.
Right, but you're making a conclusion from this that also is a physics conclusion.
So the conclusion then is more philosophical than...
But the question is how the universe came to exist, right?
No, it's whether the universe had a cause.
Right, but that's also a physics question. Right? How is this not physics?
Yeah, the conclusion is physics.
Okay, thank you. Then the arguments and your premise and your conclusion are physics. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, why aren't you working to convince the people who actually study this, who actually drive the consensus perspectives on this? Because if you could convince physicists that you're correct, guess what? On this show, we would be like, that's correct. That's physics. I mean, instead of calling up and saying 14 billion years, right, and us saying, well, that's what physicists say, you could say, because there was this cause that is timeless and personal, and we would say, yeah, that's what physicists say. So why wouldn't you convince the people who actually would have an impact on what people believe about it? Why would you call this show, instead of talking to people in physics, publishing in physics, like convincing physicists?
You guys have bashed the Kalam argument for quite a while, so I thought maybe I would come in and
do it again, right? I mean, Matt does a different thing with it, and probably people like it better. Some people don't get where I'm coming from with nothing. Or they think I don't get where I'm coming from with nothing, and maybe I don't. But the point is, there's an entire field of research on this particular topic, where the universe came from. And those would be, don't you think, for an honest person who wants to change the consensus on what that means and make it driven toward whatever they believe that conclusion should rightly be, wouldn't physicists be the people to convince? Sure. So why aren't people working to convince physicists? Why is this staying in the realm of religion?
Well, they are trying to come a lot smarter.
So call us back when the physicists have changed their mind, and we can have a conversation that starts with, okay, this is the consensus of physics, that there is this thing that I define as God.
You will only believe it if some physicists believe it.
Well, we sat there earlier and said 14 billion years ago or whatever, and we were all just sort of like, yeah, because physics, right? And I mean, yeah, they put out their information and you can go and look at it. That's the beauty of science. You can go and see how it's done if this interests you. If it doesn't, you're not going to look it up, which I don't really look it up. I've read some things, but not that much. But the point, I have read enough to know that your conclusion, which you just said a little while ago, is physics, is not what physicists are saying.
I would have to disagree.
You can disagree all you want, but physicists are not putting forward Kalam.
All right. Yeah, I recommend people research what a lot of physicists have to say about this.
Yeah, I do, because if this is consensus, I'm not aware of it. I have yet to hear them say that this is, the personal.
Well, and once you get to personal and timeless, then you're going beyond what the physics is. You're now injecting.
I'm unpacking what it means to be a cause of the universe. In a philosophy,
but we don't know.
Yeah, how do we know what causes universes?
It seems like physicists would be the people most equipped to define this.
We can discuss what would be the cause of the universe. I mean,
the best people to discuss it would be physicists. I mean, I guess that's what I'm saying, is it's like the people that you want to talk to are people who are driving you want to talk to the editors of mainstream physics journals. You want to talk to the heads of the departments of astrophysics at universities. That's who you want to be talking to, that can help you push forward the agenda of helping the rest of physicists understand why this thing should be consensus in their field.
All right. So I mustn't speak to you guys about the Kalam.
I mean, you can, but it's a pointless endeavor, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like John is saying, he's going to be sitting here with his eyes glazing over. Most people have heard Kalam before. At the end of the day, what's really going to make an impact is if you can convince the people who actually make the decisions about what is and isn't valid science in this area. Those are the people you want to convince.
You guys prefer to discuss then Christianity in general as you discuss with your first quarter, because then maybe
I'm okay discussing stuff, but in this particular instance, you're talking about extremely complex science, right?
Yeah, it is very complex.
But we're really not qualified.
And you can call the show all you want, and basically we're going to be going either because that's what I've read that a physicist says about it, right? That's what physics has to say about it. But then you're going to say other things, and I'm going to be like, I don't think that's what physics says about it. Right. And that's all you're going to get from me is an amateur.
On this stuff is really interesting, actually.
I don't find it interesting.
Yeah, and the thing is even if I accepted your premises and I agreed that the universe had a cause, I still don't know how you get to God.
I can explain if you want.
Well, I think you're just labeling whatever it is, unknown thing it is, you're calling it God, and then at that point I say, why? Why call it God?
Want me to explain?
Sure.
So first of all, something we can probably agree on is whatever caused the universe needs to be pretty powerful to cause the entire universe. I mean, what
if it's counterintuitive? Right? What if it's one of those weird counterintuitive things in physics where you think it's a certain way and then you figure out what it really is and you're like, whoa, that's not what we expected? Like, what if we uncovered the fact of what caused the universe and it really wasn't as powerful as we would have assumed because intuition is not a good way to come up with ideas.
Intuition,
Well, no, intuition is
bad for it.
Intuition is an okay thing, but when you're talking about stuff that is like unknown and right now unknowable, to use your intuition on something where you're talking about a time when all of our laws of physics would break down is really, really sketchy.
Do you still want to hear my argument?
Yeah, I'll shut up and let you talk to John.
All right. So would you say that whatever caused the universe would be pretty powerful to cause the entire universe?
Not necessarily. Since it's unknown, like Tracy said, things are counterintuitive all the time. So if it's another self-evident argument, I'm not particularly convinced. I'm not even convinced that it's a sentient, if there was a cause, that it's even a sentient being in any way that we understand.
Yeah, I can get to there, but I'm just first talking about this. You wouldn't think it would be powerful. You would think could be weak.
It depends what the mechanism is.
Well, whatever the mechanism is, it needs to be powerful to create the entire universe. This universe is massive. It has a lot of energy.
It is now, but it's been expanding for 15 billion years.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the energy inside it. It consists of a lot of energy. So you don't think it would be powerful?
Well, if the energy already existed and it's just in a different form now, no, I don't think anything had to create that energy.
Okay, we're saying if we accept the conclusion the universe has a cause, that means, you said, just for argument's sake, you would accept the conclusion. That means that there was no energy beforehand. So whatever caused the universe would have had to have created the energy, right?
Well, I guess I'm not prepared to accept that if it had a cause that the energy didn't already exist.
That's a given, though. How can
from my scientific understanding, you can't create or destroy energy or matter.
Yeah, I think you're a little confused on that point.
I don't think I am. But continue. Okay, let's for the sake of argument, let's say it's powerful. Okay, now what?
Okay, we can get to whatever caused the universe needs to be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial.
Why?
Because whatever caused the universe began to exist. Space began to exist. Time began to exist. Matter began to exist when the universe began to exist. So whatever created it needs to be not those things or transcendent of those things.
So now you're saying created rather than caused.
Oh, caused is what I meant. Sorry, not created. I misspoke. Whatever caused it needs to transcend space, time, and matter, because space, time, and matter began at that point. Does that make sense?
Okay. Matt's in the audience going nuts right now, but I can't hear what he's saying.
And personal. This one's a little more technical. So it basically goes that if you have a cause without an effect, right? Or if you have a cause that exists timelessly, and then the effect happens a finite time ago, right? It needs to be an agent of free will to make that effect come into existence. Else the cause would just sit there timelessly.
I think this is a lot of assumptions about whatever was before. I mean, all of this is just assumptions. We have no way to confirm anything about what you're saying. It's just speculation.
You're kind of making a giant leap between a cause and an agent with free will.
Yeah, without knowing the nature of whatever was before this universe, I can't say that it was like a constant. I can't say that it was one thing. I can't say that it wasn't itself some incarnation of time and space that then converted into this in a way that we can't go back and look at. I mean, I have no idea. And the people, anyway, I'm not going to preach about the people who can, but I'm just going to say this is why I'm just like, I'm useless in this conversation.
Well, it goes down a rabbit hole, but I think you basically have to make so many assumptions that you're basically just defining the God that you want, the being that you want to be, the cause as the cause, and then saying...
I didn't make any assumptions there.
Oh, you made lots of assumptions. Like that this was a personal entity with free will who...
Yeah, I didn't assume that. I concluded that, and I gave my argument.
Well, you assume that just because this...
Right, but the thing is you have nothing upon which to base that argument, right? There's nothing that we can measure. There's nothing we can go back and look at. There's nothing we can say with certainty about any of this, but you're just saying stuff and then saying, yes, and this makes sense because of what we know about now.
You can. If we accept the conclusion, you can make you can make other conclusions based on that with pretty good certainty.
Then why haven't physicists made those conclusions?
Like, for instance, if a car crashed into another car, right?
Right.
You can...
You're using physics, though, based on what we have now. And you can't apply any of that to what came before. We don't know. I mean, we just don't know. It's a big black hole of knowledge. And all I can say...
We just say, we don't know, we don't know.
Yes, if you don't know, say you don't know. Why wouldn't you say you don't know if you don't know something?
That's the only rational response to something you don't know, is that you don't know.
I'm going to say, feel free to pursue this at the blog. Let's crowdsource this one.
You can at least talk about it.
We did talk about it. I even shut up and let John talk about it. I mean, we've talked about it. And you even said that we've talked about it countless times previously on the show. This is definitely something that, yes, we can talk about. We do talk about. I allow conversation. I've let you talk about it.
I've listened to all of the other discussions you've had on the Kalam, but unfortunately, they haven't defended it very well.
Okay, well, feel free to defend it at the blog. Point out what we're missing, where we went wrong, where you disagree. Like I had told the other caller, when you first post at the blog, freethoughtblogs/AXP, when you first post, it has to be moderated. I usually moderate any serious entries. If I go there and somebody's making a non-trolling comment, I go ahead and let it through. It doesn't, and people like to talk to theists at the blog, so feel free to post there.
All right.
I can guarantee you there are people at the blog who will be more informed than me and probably less frustrating to talk to about this than I am. So if that's...
Is Matt more informed on this argument?
I don't know. I don't know how informed Matt would call himself or consider himself as a layperson. I think he's more informed than me because I don't care about this topic, and he actually cares enough to look it up.
Wow.
So
I'd definitely like to call again and speak to you guys. What other topics are you guys?
You might call when Jen is on, right? She's actually got some kind of engineering background, so she may be more interested in be talking this out with you. And I know that on Talk Heathen, the show that's on earlier on Sundays, they sometimes have like somebody with a physics background. I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Maybe somebody knows that and can help us out. They've had somebody with a physics background on there before. I'm assuming they're still helping out with the show and still helping with hosting, but I might be wrong.
We're not faulting you for calling in. We took your call. It's just I think we've kind of we've run its course now. We kind of understand what you believe and why you believe it.
And you're probably going to get some support at the blog with people saying Tracie is completely, off her nut on this one. So feel free to go ahead and post your thoughts there. Like I said, just give it maybe a day or two when you first post. Don't think that it didn't go through. Just know that it has to be moderated. We'll moderate it. If you don't see it in a couple days, then there might be a problem. But I'm pretty good about going in Monday, Tuesday, and making sure that I clear those comments. So feel free to post there, and maybe you'll talk to some people who have more interest, have more information, more background, who are more able to relate to what you're describing.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Thank
ramble
you.
along.
No, I really appreciate the call. All right. So that was Brandon. And so now we're moving along to, and I'm not even sure how to say this. I'm going to say MC Colbert from Puerto Rico, who wants to talk about positive atheism in Puerto Rico. You're on with Tracie and John.
Hey, Tracie and John. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Thanks. Thanks for taking my call.
So what's going on in Puerto Rico?
Great weather.
I mean, as far as atheism.
As far as atheism, there's a pretty good group of atheists here, I find. But I would say Catholics. The Catholic religion is pretty big here.
Okay.
So basically, the first caller actually touched upon many things that I wanted to talk about. First off, I'm an atheist, and I'm also black, which is kind of a shock to a lot of people when I say that I'm an atheist, and especially being black, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, like I have a third eye. But really, it's kind of like that. But when I was talking, what I want to talk about was positive atheism. She mentioned earlier, and as Matt also mentioned, leave your grandma alone. I find that there's certain conversations that there's no need to even have them or even need to go there. It's kind of like I view it now as more of a there's certain conversations where you're just going to pass by each other and you're not going to get anywhere, and you know it's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
Because these people are so firm in their belief that it's just never going to change their mind or even get them to look at anything. And you just have to leave it alone. And that's something I learned over the years of being an atheist. And my mother is a diehard Catholic. And I remember when I came out to her, it was like the biggest shock ever. And she thought that I actually struggled with the problem of going to hell and all that kind of stuff. But eventually I got over it. But that was one of the first things she had said, that I was going to go to hell. And it was kind of like, wow, your own mother said you're going to hell. It's not something you do. You know, but it's, you just kind of let it go, because there's no need to, or even bother to basically justify yourself, you could say. It's just a lack of a belief, and you told that and you told that. And I feel as if like many people, like many of the atheists that I kind of run into, especially in the Black community, I always feel as if like they need to basically defend themselves. But it's more so like, just, I mean, who cares? You know, it's somebody thinks that you're an atheist, and it's whatever negative thoughts they have of that, kind of just let it go. And don't even, at this point, I don't even try to fight it or even try to discuss certain things with certain people, because I just know it's not going to go anywhere.
Sure.
And it's one of those things, because my mother, for instance, like, I keep bringing back to her, because there's certain things that, like, she's a diehard believer. When I say diehard believer, like, really into the Catholic Church. And there's certain things I actually believe that I really think are really ridiculous, but I'm not going to, trying to fight her over that and trying to convey her, like, hey, this is this, that. And even recently with the past incidents with the church, with the Catholic Church, she actually called me herself and she said, "Oh, hey, it kind of touched her faith in a way." And I was like, wow, like something actually got to her, you know what I mean? And it wasn't me. And
that's interesting.
It was like, oh, wow, like she's questioning this now. And she said, I'm very disappointed with what's going on. And she actually was talking to me about this. And I almost felt as if like it was more of tell me more about this atheism thing, you know what I mean? Like, it was like, I felt like it was more about that. And, when she, got to news about what was going on with, Catholic Church and all that kind of stuff. And so basically it's, to all my Black atheists out there, you're perfectly fine, with the way you are. If you're an atheist or not. But I do feel like in the Black community, being an atheist is like the biggest shocker ever. Yeah,
and, I think you certainly have like a unique situation and unique cultural issues around that don't apply necessarily to everyone. And we had some interesting discussion about that on the blog, where they were saying, I don't understand this need for like a Black atheist community, like Black non-believers, because we had Mandisa on. Right. And I think a lot of people don't understand that certain demographics have unique problems, that it's okay to address them in a unique way because they don't apply universally.
Right. Yeah, that's very important, that you said that. Because even me, when I became an atheist, it was more so it was my own personal journey. It was just me, myself, and I, and no one knew about it. And when I came out, it was my brother had asked me if I could baptize, the godfather to his son, which is my nephew. And with me being an atheist, I was kind of, I don't want to I don't want to disrespect you or anything of that, nature, but I don't really believe in it. And that's when, like, it kind of like came out, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, wow, like, and everyone felt like the need to call me and say, "Oh, you're not going to baptize your nephew?" Like,
but you have to promise, right? Don't you have to promise to raise him up in the faith? Like, exactly. It's like I can't do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I said to them, I'd be more than welcome to come to the, to the event, and I'll even come to the church, and it's like they really do not know what, it's like how would I say this? It's a strange thing, thing to them, where it's like, wow, like a Black person's an atheist. So I told them, I said, I would come to the event, I'll come to the church, but I'm just not going to participate in some of the things I like, to go and say certain things, and that I'm actually not gonna, and it's just basically to respect you, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And they were very shocked by that. First of all, they were very shocked I even showed up to the church. But I think that being a Catholic, to get to be a godfather or godmother, have to attend, I think it's like church service, something like that. Like, don't quote me on this. Where you have to speak with the priest, and they have to give you this whole course about what baptism is and all that kind of stuff. And I said, I'd be more than welcome to go. And I actually went and I attended it, and it was, the same old, Catholic and whatnot. And it was just, basically, what really bothered me the most was the fact that my nephew, who was at the time, I was 6 or 7 months old, was thought to be a sinner. And that really did not sit well with me at all.
I understand.
And I explained that to them. I said, hey, I think this is a very, very perverse thought, and I'm just not going to participate in this the way you think I'm going, the way you need me to.
I'm super glad. I mean, it sounds like you have a really good relationship with your family, and it sounds like you have open lines of communication. It sounds like you have...
absolutely.
That's awesome.
And it's all through the positive atheism. It's not...
Right.
I wasn't really trying to offend them or in any way, shape, or form. And they totally understand, and everybody knows that. For instance, we'll go to a family dinner. For instance, my mother celebrated her 50th, and my wife she's recently became an atheist. She came out, and I told her, I said, this is going to be the prayer service before dinner, and et cetera.
Super cool.
This is what they do, and I hope that's okay with you. Like, that's perfectly fine with me. And I think that's where the positive atheism comes, where it's like, oh, I'm not going to do this, or, oh, this is crazy. And, I just said, hey, they totally understand me when I hope they do.
Yeah. And I think there are definitely times when the soft, pitch or the more passive approach is probably best. Like you say, you just hang back and you let people approach you. They'll eventually come to you. These conversations will be organic. You don't have to necessarily make an announcement that you're an atheist. It will come out.
Yeah.
No, I totally get it. Hey, we have a few more calls to get on and only a couple minutes, so I'm going to let you go.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please get on to it. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much, though, for your call, and I think it was a good message.
All right, thank you. And
Appreciate
thanks for taking my call.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on to Al in Chicago. Hey, you're talking to Tracy and John. It says you want some advice on how to help people find hope without religion.
Hi, Al.
Yes. Hi, how are you both?
Good.
I'm calling about non-believers who struggle to feel hopeful themselves. I have support systems in place for myself and people to talk to, but I get burned out really easily. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to be a community counselor for people who have severe mental illness, sort of like a case manager. And it's kind of hard to do that when I just don't really have that energy myself. These people have lifespans that are quite a bit shorter. They've gone through some really rough lives, some of them homeless, some of them just put out on the street. And before I looked at things skeptically, I would try to have faith that there was some spiritual source of wisdom or something that, if I fail or if I struggle, it's okay because I'm guided in some way. But now, since there's not really any kind of spirit to point to, it's just me making choices, moving one day to the next, and it's hard not to feel like I'm just at the mercy of whatever random forces are affecting me. I'm just wondering if you know of any resources for non-believers in the helping professions, those who are either nonprofit or out there working to help people at homes, or just to keep not only their own hope going, but the hope for other people.
I'm going to say that I'll let you know right away because we only have a few minutes left, but I want to say this is an area where I think we're lacking in resources, but I also want to say that there is a resource called Foundation Beyond Belief.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that comes to my mind. Foundation Beyond Belief is an umbrella resource that deals in all kinds of charities. And if there is a charity out there that is like a secular-oriented support for something like this, I would say tap Foundation Beyond Belief, ask them about what you're looking for, ask them if they know of any resources that fit that description. And additionally, if you know of any like local atheist groups, check with them, because sometimes, like we, for example, have a charity drive, but again, it's not, we're not in a position to like get somebody in a home if they're homeless. We do, supplies and things like that, but unfortunately, this is one of those areas where religion really kind of has a hands down on us as secular, compared to secular charities. We just do not have the history and the funding and the coordination that churches have in order to provide some things like this. And I really hope that someday in the future, we have that kind of capacity. And if we have it currently, and anybody knows about that, it would be Foundation Beyond Belief.
Yeah. I was thinking of them too, but also the perspective of helping people have hope when they're giving up their religion. I would also recommend something like Recovering from Religion or the Secular Therapist Project, because there's, I do appreciate that people who have kind of been raised in religion have that attitude that God kind of has everything under control and I don't need to worry about it, and making that transition between, hey, I'm responsible for my own well-being, and I can, and I'm a powerful person myself who can steer my life the way I want it to. I think that sometimes people need help kind of making that transition. So, and
it can be really hard though he's talking about people that are severely disenfranchised. This is people that are so disempowered right now in their lives, and that's the thing that, like, the idea of empowerment, I understand it from a perspective of, in general, but when you're dealing with homelessness and don't have food, and I have kids and I don't know where they're going to sleep tonight.
That's a whole different level.
That's an entirely different, that's not the, hey, try to have a good attitude. But there is also like humanist groups. There's the UU Church, right? They are very, very civic minded. They may have some kind of resources too. I would look at Universal Unitarian?
Unitarian Universalist Church.
Okay, yeah, check and see if there's anything like that in your area. Any of these groups may be able to help, and hopefully something that I've thrown down, because I don't want to just make it sound like I'm throwing out this bucket of stuff at you, but I also don't want to hang up this phone without giving you some resources and somewhere to call that can probably help you better than we can.
Yeah.
Sure, and I sincerely appreciate it. Just one very small thing. If you were to say something to a person who is lacking a sense of hope and direction, what's often something that you would say?
It's tough with the group you're talking about. We don't normally get asked that from people that are struggling as hard as what you're describing. You're talking about people who are in situations who are not just dealing with like a lack of faith, they're dealing with a lack of basic resource. And that's huge. That's no small thing. And that's not something where I think I can hand words to someone and it's going to make it better. I would say try to hang in there as much as you can. Try to find, like you're doing, as many resources as you can reach out to. I'm going to ask people at our blog, if you know of resources, if you're out there and you're screaming at your television set and you're saying, hey, why aren't you recommending this? Or, hey, this group is really helpful. Please go to the blog at freethoughtblogs/AXP and post your recommendations. And I want to say, Al, feel free to visit the blog and see if people respond to that. I don't know if they will or not, but I want as many people crowdsourcing this as possible, because we really need to help in these situations, and we don't as much as we could. And I would tell them you're not alone. There are people out there who want to help. There's organizations, there's Red Cross, there's people who make it their life's passion and work to help people who are struggling and who aren't getting their basic needs met. So it's a matter of getting hooked up. I appreciate that for sure. I'll let you go just
I do have to say a big shout out to the crew behind the scenes.
We will.
I cannot overstate.
In fact, the crew behind the scenes, thank you very much, and you can show yourselves and do your wave.
Thank you, crew.
There you go. We're showing them now.
And so important.
Thanks to the audience. Thanks to all of our callers, even the ones that I may have frustrated.
Yeah.
And I do want to say that even though we're not doing the after show, that one call on line 1 may want to hang on for the next show. It may actually be relevant. So that's up. I'm going to leave that to the control room to decide if they think, you know, that call is going to be good for the next show. They just kind of chimed into my ear and said yes. So we will let Truth Wanted handle that next one, and we are
stick around for Truth Wanted. They'll be on right now.
Dan, and we'll be swapping out. So we're logging out.
And thanks to the great audience and the great crew again, and everybody who helps make this show work. We appreciate you.
And come on out to dinner.
I walked back and forth. What's with the pylon there? Huh? The orange pylon. That's a good idea. I have no idea. But it's refreshing. I haven't seen a warning.
Can you hear us? There you go. Yes, we're ready to go. Okay.
All right, 1 minute to live.
We're ready to welcome Truth Wanted for the first episode. I am. Yeah? Woo! Check that out. Let's do this. So there. We want truth. 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 We want truth.
And now it's Truth Wanted.
We want truth.
Chanting
times Truth Wanted.
Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host, Objectively Dan.
I am your co-host, Genetically Modified Skeptic.
Yes. And so, some of you are wondering, what the heck is this? Right? Because we've been doing test streams of this show for the past couple months now, but maybe you're just now joining us for the first time. This is another call-in show, but it's a little bit different from the previous ones. But before I explain why, I have to explain a little bit about myself. So, about 3 years ago, I was a student leader in a college ministry, and I had a conversation with a fellow named Anthony Magnabosco. You might have heard of him. Yeah, so he has this thing called street epistemology, which is this method of talking to people about their beliefs in a non-confrontational manner. It's really productive, and it's really awesome. And I had a conversation with him, which is on YouTube right now that you can go check out after the show if you want. Mark, our producer in the back, has a picture that I believe he's going to show of the clip in a second. Not the clip itself, but just a thumbnail, so you can look it up. And I had a conversation with him as a Christian that just kind of blew my mind, and it was one of the stepping stones for me to come to where I am today. So there it is right now, and the reason why I have that circled in that date there is because this week, it was exactly 3 years ago, just a couple days ago, it was 3 years ago from the day that I had that conversation with Anthony. So I went from student minister in a college ministry to like hosting a show at the Atheist Community of Austin.
There we go.
Yeah, so it's kind of been a wild journey. But there's more info on that on Anthony Magnabosco's channel and my personal YouTube channel. You can check that out later. But that's just kind of give you an intro to what this show is. This is me kind of talking to people about their beliefs from their framework, from their state of mind, kind of using street epistemology, although not exclusively. And something else that's special about the show is we have new guest hosts every single week. So I know you love Drew as much as I do. He's really awesome. But next week, we're going to have other people. And then the week after that, and the week after that. So if you really want to catch up on some goodies, next Sunday, Anthony Magnabosco is going to be my co-host. And that's going to be a fun show. But if you tune into our regular time, which will be on Fridays at 6 o'clock, this Friday, I'm getting an ex-Nazi his name's Josh Turner. He went to prison and now he's out, and he has been going around talking about his story and how he kind of deconverted from that ideology. And we're just going to talk to him about like what his beliefs were and how he kind of transitions from that. It's going to be a really interesting show. And of course, those of you who know Anthony Magnabosco know Anthony Magnabosco. He's a great friend of mine. We co-host the Epistemic podcast together, and he's going to be just an awesome guest. So look out for that.
He's bald, not a skinhead.
Yes,
right. There's a
true.
distinction you have to make there.
That's correct. Yes. So tune into those shows when you can. But let me introduce my guest host today, since I've been talking about myself so much. This is Drew McCoy, also known as Genetically Modified Skeptic. Drew, welcome.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. You know, I'm an ex-Christian too, and I was just talking about on my Discord that back in the day, back in college, before I deconverted, I planned on being a Christian counselor, bringing people to Christ while they're in a very vulnerable state. So that's great. But
and look where you ended up now.
Yeah, totally opposite end of the spectrum. Which, I'm glad about. Maybe I'm a little bit less manipulative now. That's what I aim for. But I'm looking forward to the show, and thanks for having me on. I think we're gonna have some pretty fun conversations. Hopefully, I don't perform so well that Anthony ends up being a disappointment next week, because I don't want to shame Anthony. He's too beautiful and pure to me.
No, Anthony's great. I'm really excited to have him on as a guest, but I'm excited for right now with you being here. You actually were a guest host before when we were doing our test runs of the show, and if you want to see what those test episodes look like, and also for future episodes, you can subscribe to the Truth Wanted YouTube channel. So make sure to check that out, and we'll be uploading clips from those older episodes as the weeks go by. And also, you can check us out on Facebook. We have a Truth Wanted Facebook page. And of course, Drew has his channel, Genetically Modified Skeptic. We're both on Twitter. I mean, we're all over the place. You can totally find us. And we'll remind you again at the end of the show. Also, if you want to get an audio version of this, we'll be doing it on Spreaker as well, where we'll have like a podcast of it. So we're just all over the place. We give you lots of options. So, Drew, I want to talk to you a little bit more about your Christian identity, because it's interesting, because you kind of have a really similar experience to mine when it comes to like what we were doing. Like we were both in kind of a ministerial role. What was it for you that kind of, I know it's a lot of things, but like I know for me there was like individual steps. Was it like watching other atheists on YouTube? Was it just having your own doubts? What was that like?
So it's kind of funny because I think the things that really started me doubting, not necessarily convinced me in the end, but started me doubting were things that you had already coped with because you grew up a little bit more liberal than me. And, you know, liberal using...
Well, that's loosely. Relative. We live in Texas. I mean, like,
yeah. Like you didn't think that being gay should be illegal.
No, I was a Methodist. I was a Methodist. So, like, there is a difference between the majority Baptist culture you see here. Yeah. So I basically learned in an astronomy class in college that the Earth is not 6,000 years old. And I was like, well, shit, that's what I've been taught my entire life. What do I do now? Eventually, you know, I figured out how to square that away just a little bit. A couple of years later, I realized, you know, I'm an old Earth creationist, and I don't know if I believe in evolution, but the Earth is old at least, and you know, I'm still pretty conservative. And then I took a master's level human sexuality course, and I realized that being gay is, you know, that's a thing that you don't just all of a sudden fall into because you're a bad person. That's who you are. And I didn't know how to deal with that. And so eventually I realized that, you know, the Bible's not inerrant like I thought. And I thought, you know, God made this work that everyone's arguing whether these parts are metaphorical, these parts are literal, whatever. And basically I realized, you know, God wasn't able to write something that everyone was able to agree on and understand, even if they're really trying. So God is a flawed author. Definitionally cannot be God. He has flaws. Yeah.
All holy texts are like that. And so that's where I ended up becoming an atheist. And it's a pretty different route than you because of some of the issues. But we came from a similar idea of just general, almost non-denominational Protestantism. I was just a lot more conservative in that.
Yeah. And we both have videos actually talking more about our personal deconversion experiences that you can both check out on our respective channels if you want to know more about that. But I'm just ready to jump right in. Are you ready to jump in?
Let's just jump right into it.
Let's just go get it. Before we jump into the calls, let me just show off. We got these nice little mugs right here that have Truth Wine on it. I didn't even ask for these. They just got these out. And, like, I'm just so pleased with these. Like, our first episode, we already have, like...
I know, I don't even have merch. Dude. I've been around for over a year, and I don't have merch yet, so...
Yeah, you should get some mugs.
I'll probably get some merch eventually. Yeah. I'll donate a genetically modified skeptic mug for this table.
Right on. Yeah. I'll drink that. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get to our first caller. Now, remember... this show is a little bit different. We're kind of taking people's questions about our beliefs, but we're also asking other people about their beliefs. So it's a little bit different than some of the other shows. So the conversations are going to be different. So while I get to that, let's go ahead and talk to, is it Marquise? Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes.
Yes.
That's how it's pronounced.
Hi, welcome to Truth Wanted. How's it going?
It's going fine. Bit nervous calling from my first live call in.
Yeah.
This is our first show, so nerves all around.
Yeah, right. Nervousness all around. But so I have a note here saying that you want to talk about being a black atheist in a religious state.
Ooh, yeah.
I've technically deconverted, I think, about a year ago. Around at that time, I was living in Tennessee, and it wasn't really that big of a problem because, surprisingly enough, at my school there was actually a large amount of atheists that was part of the school there. It was until I moved back to my home in Mississippi when problems started to arise, because Mississippi is a heavily black state, and it's quite difficult trying to find other people with similar beliefs here. I think the only other person I can actually talk to this about is my cousin, and that's because we both deconverted around at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, that's tough. You know, we already have. I know Drew and I have the problem of talking with our families about what we're doing now and stuff, and I can't imagine just the extra layer of, you know, belonging to a culture that was majority Christian. And has been for a long time and is much more insular about it. So a few weeks ago, we got to talk to Mandisa Thomas, who was here for the ACA back cruise, and she highlighted a lot of those experiences and what's that's like for the black community. And it's just not something that you and I can really relate to.
It's not something that we experience, but hopefully we can become enlightened a little bit on that and hopefully, you know, dish out some resources or something like that.
Yeah. we definitely want to be able to help give you some tools. So what do you think it is that you're struggling with most? Do you think it's actually telling people that you're an atheist, or do you think it's just, like, tell me more about that?
I think it's more trying to find community, because back when I was living in Tennessee, I still had quite a number of friends that were also atheists themselves. But once I moved back here to Mississippi, that immediately was shut down. And I've tried searching for other at least atheist or secular communities here in Mississippi, but that's over in several other towns near the edges of the state. So that's a bit too long of a drive to try to make that.
I have a resource that I can just shout really quick, and then I think if you wanted to, it'd be kind of cool if you talked about how you basically bridge the gap between, the really conservative part of Texas that you live in, and starting a group of your own and assimilating into a group that wasn't your own and things like that. But the first place I would recommend that you go is holykoolaid.com. Holy Kool-Aid, Thomas Westbrook, great activist. He has a list of just a ton of secular organizations, atheist groups from all over the place, all of the United States. I believe that he gets kind of international on that list too. And if there is a list that you're going to find an atheist community on, it's going to be on holykoolaid.com. It's a cool website, and he's a great creator anyway, so there'll be some other cool things to see on there, like things about conferences and not fearing hell, and just all of his cool videos that he makes. But yeah, go to holykoolaid.com and search that. See if you can find a community in Mississippi. If there is one, it's probably on that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I would add on to that and say that after this conversation, I'm going to go ahead and put you back on hold, and I think some of the ACA people here would love to plug you into some of the communities that they know that they have contacts lists with, and maybe help you, give you some resources there too. One thing that's cool about the ACA is that even though we're located in Austin, we have lots and lots of connections with all kinds of people. So yeah, we'd love to help you out with that.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, we'll go ahead and swing you over there. So it's already hard enough being countercultural in the way that we are, right? Because, we live in a majority Christian country, majority Christian state, and then to add on the layers and layers and layers, of these other identities, it's really frustrating. And I wish I had an answer to give people every time. But, I struggle with that myself with my own family and with my own people. I use the techniques and the street epistemology stuff with people that I know, but it's different with people that than it is with,
for sure. It's different having conversations on the internet. It's different having conversations with total strangers. It's different having conversations with family, and there's unique challenges there. And, as far as being a black non-believer, something that Mandisa Thomas will address from time to time is there are good reasons why a lot of the black community is seen as Christian, is so integrated in the church. But, we kind of need to take a step forward and have a place for people who are not Christian and who do still care about equal rights and care about having their spot at the table. But, it's not a black and white thing. Oh, that's something I didn't intend. But yeah, it's not a simple issue, and it's not something we'll be able to solve. And as great as Mandisa is, it's not something that she can solve right off the bat either. It's
certainly not on her own.
Yeah,
it certainly takes a collective effort of people willing to, come together and be like you said, have a place at the table to have these kinds of conversations. And that's something also, just to kind of introduce more of the show. I want to give people a place at the table to talk about their beliefs where they don't have to feel ashamed of having them or feel like that they haven't had the means to express them at all. Because I know you and I grew up in a place where the doubts we were having weren't even first of all, weren't considered a possibility in some regards, but also just weren't addressed. And when they were addressed, it wasn't helpful. It was just they told you to just keep believing the same things you've always believed. It's but I'm struggling with that. How does it, so.
Yeah, you get a lot of non-answers, and sometimes you get a lot of answers that have been rehearsed, and you realize how just empty they are once you're on the other side of those answers, the receiving end.
Yeah, for sure. But we're going to go ahead and go to our next caller. This is from Sean. Can you hear us, Sean?
Sure.
Hey, what's up? I hear you have...
What's going on, guys?
Yeah, I have a note here saying you wanted to talk about the existence of a real God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me more about that.
Okay. So we do agree that our bodies are powered by energy, correct?
Powered by energy.
Yeah, like it's electrical pulses inside our body that makes everything work.
Yeah, I mean, I think
not quite electrical pulses, but I think that's just kind of nitpicky. But yeah, I mean, energy.
Right,
that's
right.
what powers
energy is
anything.
what's causing our bodies to move. Yeah. I'd agree with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So we both agree that energy can't be destroyed. It just is dispersed into the universe or whatever after it's used for whatever it's used for.
Well, before you keep going, and I am interested in what you have to say, but let me ask you this.
Okay.
Is this, I'm assuming you're presenting it like a syllogism to be like an argument. Is this argument the reason why you believe a God exists? Like, is this your biggest reason?
Yeah, this is. I'm actually skeptic, but this is the reason why I believe that there is a God. Now, it may not be a sentient being as far as the Bible is portraying, but maybe in the past with past civilizations, they realized that the energy that's in our bodies, the energy that's all over the universe, or all around us, is they worship that as a God. And we are all part of it. Do you believe that there's a such thing as positive and negative energy?
Not really.
It depends on exactly how you're defining those things. If you give some kind of emotional quality to positive and negative.
Okay,
or something,
let's say you and a friend were sitting having lunch. I don't want to go too far, but say you and a friend were sitting having lunch, and you guys were having a nice, good conversation. Everything is happy and whatever, and then someone comes around you, and without even knowing that person or knowing their intentions, you can kind of feel a negative vibe from that person.
Yeah, but that's just vibes, though. That's not the same energy that's powering our bodies, right?
But I'm saying there is no way that we can say that our energies don't interact independent from our thoughts with each other. You know what I'm saying? It's like your positive energy.
Well, I wonder, is there a way that you could think of scientifically testing that? Because that seems like something that could be within the realm of science, right?
Maybe.
So I think the way I would go about determining
I'm
that.
not sure.
You say you're not a scientist, so you're not sure. Okay.
Yeah,
no, I'm not either. But I think the way that I want to go about that, if I really wanted to feel like I had a strong grasp on, like our energies somehow intermingle, then I would want to figure out how to scientifically test that. We have to define energy. We have to figure out what all of the confounding variables that might be there that would interfere with our experiment. And then once we've defined those energies, see whether or not they interfere with each other in some way based on a certain kind of interaction.
Aside from testing it, but we do, as humans, we do feel that, and we do know that it exists in sort of a way, whatever. It's saying existence is like our definition that we made to, perceive what's going on around us and things that we understand, but we can't use our definitions for things that we have no understanding for, correct?
That was a lot. I'll be honest with you. My mind is more focused on how this relates to God in any way, because I'll agree with you that like energy exists, but what is the connection between energy and God?
Okay, so how do we know that energy is not God? I'm not saying that it is, but how can we say that it's not?
Well, doesn't that entirely depend on how you define God?
Well, that was what I was saying from the earlier part. Okay, so maybe when the first thought of we have a maker or whatever came into being, into human thought process, that
now you're talking about explaining makers and stuff, right? So I need you to help me out here, because I need to understand how you're, the observation that there's energy and that that exists doesn't necessarily preclude to me that there is a maker or like a creative force. But
well, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that energy. All right. Let's take the God of the Bible and completely forget about that. That's not what I'm talking about. But the way that came about is because of, different interpretations.
What do you mean the way that came about? What are you talking about? What's the they?
You know how people formulated that God was sentient and that, whatever God you believe in, when the first thought that God was a sentient being was transcribed from something that was there before people thought that God was a sentient being, because people may have been, worshiping the energy that powers the universe instead of a being. And that was what they referred to as, quote unquote, God, the energy that powers everything in the universe.
Okay, I think I'm understanding what you're saying. So people had these kind of intonations for a long time that there's this energy, there's this force, maybe a sentience behind the universe. There's something there that, not necessarily making it personified, but there's something intentional about everything. There's agency behind all of the things that we see in the universe. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Right. That's what. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and so people saw that, and then they formulated these ideas of like the biblical God or just the Abrahamic.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I want to make sure I get that. So yeah, maybe people did seek some kind of agency. They thought there must be something behind this. There's something bigger that we're not understanding here. So
right.
Is it justified to then say, because it seems like to me, I have this intuition to me that there's something behind this, there's some agency here, that must mean that there is an agency there. Is that intuition that people had for, maybe all of humanity, is that sufficient to say that there actually is something to that?
Well, what I'm saying that there is something to it because it's something that we experience and we can use that energy, we can feel it, but I'm not advocating for, the God of the Bible, but
yeah,
there is something that powers the universe, that powers us, and that when we die, the energy that is in us goes back to. So we're a part of that for an eternity.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying,
understand what I'm saying?
Well, so there's energy and it exists in a system, and you're saying when we die, we take that energy back and it goes back into the system, right? Because energy is not created or destroyed, right?
Right.
And so that's kind of, I am still a little bit confused because I just don't know what, are you just calling the energy God? Or what is the God part of that? Is it something supernatural? Because you're describing something natural to me, right? Like it seems that energy.
All right. So who? That's what I'm saying. Let's take the God of the Bible off the table.
Yeah. We're not talking about the God of the Bible.
Yeah, there's plenty of other ideas.
But what I'm saying about that is that we don't have to be speaking in supernatural to be referring to God. God is supernatural in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have to be speaking supernatural to be speaking of the part of us that is everything.
So your God in this scenario, like this could be something that a total philosophical naturalist could believe in. You don't have to believe in anything supernatural to believe in this kind of God that you're defining.
Exactly.
Okay, so what's the line between something that you would just call a non-sentient, inanimate energy and something that you would call a God? What's the defining thing that makes this maybe natural energy a God? Because maybe this is just a definitional thing. I don't know.
Because the people who use God as supernatural, the reason that they say it's God because it's the creation of everything, but they attribute it to something supernatural when most of the time the truth is right in front of your face. You just have to see it, right? So God isn't a supernatural being that judges us for what we do. God is the one thing that powers everything.
Okay, so I think that, I think I understand your definition of God here. I guess I just wonder, why would we call something that is a natural force a God?
why does God have to be supernatural?
Okay, I mean that's kind of a cool question.
That is an interesting question.
Yeah, it's a cool question. Maybe it doesn't have to be supernatural. So why would we call something that you're defining here a god? Like what's your argument for calling this natural force a god if we say that it does exist just for sake of argument?
Because it's the one thing, like I said, the one thing that powers everything. Everything you can see, everything you can hear is powered by that energy, and it's all over the universe.
So are we just saying that God is just whatever powers everything? Is that the delineation that we're making?
Yeah, that right. And you could say that the energy is per the Big Bang, the energy is the creation of the universe, right?
Okay. I mean, you could use this language, but ultimately I think it kind of becomes a language thing. And, when I am trying to decide what kind of the words that I'll use when I'm trying to describe something myself, do you think that the word God is the thing that will best communicate your conception of, a God or an all-powerful force that's behind everything? Is that going to be the best word for you to use? And I don't advocate necessarily either way for you to use, but do you find it more, or do you think people find it more confusing when you call this natural force a god than if you just said this is a natural force that's behind everything?
Okay, so me using God is to correlate, to people who do believe in the supernatural God, what I'm trying to say, excuse me. So the reason I use God is because that's the term that humans use to explain the creator or whatever they believe to be an all-powerful and almighty, blah, 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 right?
Well,
So
okay,
that's
but
the
I want
reason
to
I'm
ask you
using the
a
term
clarifying question. Do you think that this force that you're talking about has agency?
Meaning?
Like it's sentient.
It makes choices.
No, not at all. Not at all. I don't think it's a being I just think that it is the power of the universe. To put it, as simple as possible.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it confusing to people, because most people, when describing a god, they're describing something that it has an agency and can make decisions and can do things. And you're describing something that can...
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying earlier about, the languages dying and people using different interpretations and, stuff like that. That's how it became misconstrued into the God of the Bible today.
Well, okay, but that's what's different, right? Because the God of the Bible has agency and it can make choices and do these things. So how can you say that these are the same things when they have completely different qualities?
What I'm saying is they aren't the same thing, but what I'm saying is, could that energy, the same way people look at God as being the Alpha and the Omega, right? Could this energy be looked at as the same thing? Just, all right, so say you saw a car riding down the street, and then your friend saw the same car as it turned the corner on a different street, and you got together and you said, hey, man, did you just see that car? And he says, oh, yeah, it had these many wheels on it. It had this color paint and all that. But you saw the same car, but your perception of it was different. Oh, it was a black car with, 4 wheels. So it's the same car. You guys just have different views and interpretations on that same car. But it's still that thing that passed you and passed your friend. You just talk about it differently.
Yeah, I understand, people talking about different things based on, maybe slightly different perceptions or just different preferences in describing things. I just wonder if using this word is going to end up not working in your favor, because I don't think that we have so much, I don't think we have so much difference. I think that we share a lot of kind of ideas in common. I maybe wouldn't say there's like this energy that there's like a unified equation that unified all the branches of physics and everything. I don't know about a unified force, but I think that we have a lot of ideas about naturalism in common. But do you think ultimately that saying this and describing it this way is going to get you further in arguments or further in, not necessarily arguments, just conversations, because of the conflation that can happen here. I mean, just look how long we've had to talk about what God means. I mean, of course, you're free to use your own definitions and everything and explain it, and I think this has been a really interesting conversation, but I just wonder the utility of that. Now, I totally get your point of saying that, yeah, this natural force maybe is something that people are observing and then calling God, and then they're tacking on a whole bunch of other traits to it that aren't necessarily there, but that's their confused perception. I just wonder how useful this actually is to talk about and to hold fast to. Maybe for some people you can call it God if you think it's going to get you further. Some people like us maybe don't.
Yeah, like I'm not going to.
When I say God, you understand what I'm talking about, though, right?
I don't think so. I think we had to clarify quite a bit.
I mean generally, not like specifically. Exactly what I mean. But when I say God, you know to what I'm referring to.
Well, if you just mean energy, then I would assume you would just call it energy.
If you would have said, I think there's a natural force that underlies everything, I think I would have understood what you said pretty much immediately. But saying God, it doesn't necessarily, click for me. Maybe it would for some people, but not for me.
I mean, that's semantics. Me calling it God or whatever, a force of energy. But I'm saying, the same argument still applies. What I'm saying, though, right?
If your argument being that this exists, therefore God exists.
Yeah, I think energy exists for sure, but whether you make any...
And can that energy be God? Can that energy be God?
I don't think so, because we're meaning... Drew and I mean very specific things that we're talking about God. And if we're just talking about natural forces... I don't see a reason to call it a God. I don't understand the purpose of the definition.
You can call anything if you want. If you, want to use your own definitions.
Yeah, like I can call this cone God because
But that will get really confusing for everyone else that doesn't consider the cone God.
Right. Like what happens if I call this cone God? What does it change about anything in my life? Nothing really. It's just it's just kind of there.
But energy isn't just kind of there. I mean you know
it's
what
there.
I mean? It's something. It's doing something. It's
look, this cone.
To live
this cone is doing something too. Look, it's sitting on Drew's head. That's real. I mean, it doesn't really matter though.
Yeah.
I just don't know that the acknowledgement that a force behind everything in the universe will necessarily change my ideas about my own definition of a God.
Yeah,
it wouldn't change my mind on that because they're just not the same thing.
Right.
The only thing I've learned is that you call this thing God, which I mean, fine. It doesn't influence me to change my ideas about God.
Right. If you're trying to convince us, and I think other people, I don't think it would be. I don't see the argument to be very effective.
Okay. Well, that's all I want to do is get you guys' opinion on it, and thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no,
thank
man.
you for calling.
I actually thought this call was kind of cool.
That was different than what I thought.
Yeah. We appreciate your open-mindedness and everything, and if someone's like, I'm not sure where to go from here, saying that is so respectable rather than just bullshitting and making up some reason why you're right and the person you're talking to is a moron. So thank you for being cool, and hopefully we'll talk to you another time.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, thank you guys. Y'all have a good one.
All right. That was fun.
Cool call.
Yeah. That was really
not at all what I thought it was going to be at the beginning.
No, I didn't think it was. I thought he was going to add all these things onto it, and maybe he does, but I don't know. That's the thing with definitions and stuff. And I think people use those definitions to sneak in other concepts. Like he was specifically saying, "Oh, this isn't the Christian God," but there are some people who are like, "Oh, but this energy, man, it unites us all, and that's God." And they're trying to make that link between that and Christianity or any other religion. And I think that's where kind of the trouble comes up. So
a lot of the time, instead of saying, this should be the definition for this word, and I'm using the correct one, just tell them what your definition is.
Yes.
Just define your terms and don't yell at each other and just keep it going. Keep
just
it
figure it out. Just keep digging. So with that, let's go ahead and go to our next conversation. This is Antonio in Florida. Antonio, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, gentlemen. How you doing?
I am good. How are you?
Good. No complaints.
Cool. So what do you want to talk to us about today?
So, just wanted to get some background information on you guys in terms of which argument or which fact or which observation convinced you that there are no gods. and or God?
Ooh, from the get-go, I don't know if I'm convinced that there are no gods.
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I'm just not really convinced that there is one. And so I take a step back from that and say, you know what, I don't think that I could possibly demonstrate that there isn't any kind of God. So I have to reserve judgment on that and say I don't have any evidence for anything out there right
And
now.
it also depends on how you define God. For example, you could define God as energy, and I'll say, yeah, energy exists. Yeah. So then, therefore, I believe in God. But that's not, what most people will say. I will say I'm pretty convinced that the Christian God isn't real, and I'm willing to go that far. I'm willing to say that the Christian God isn't real, and many modern conceptions of him and other kinds of gods. But if you define some God that's untestable, unverifiable in any way, I can't say whether he exists or not.
Can't talk about that anymore. It doesn't work.
There's just no way to verify it. So,
well, I'm glad you brought up the Christian God, and we can go with that one. What convinced you that is not real, or that God is not real?
Yeah, you want to start with this one, or
I think there is logical inconsistencies, basically demonstrating that there is. Oh, you got a little noise on your end, bud. I think that there's logical inconsistencies that basically make it to where we can determine that there is not, at least the Christian God is not omnipotent or is not omnibenevolent. I think there's all kinds of ways to show that all of the omnis that the Christian God demands are nonsensical.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that you can look at the characteristics of this God and say that those characteristics are not existent, but can you prove that, or does that? So how would you go further to say that because the characteristics of the God are inaccurate based on whatever scriptures or whatever believers might think, that therefore there is no God, there is no Christian God? Why isn't it just that you're wrong about his benevolence, or you're wrong about his omnipresence or his omniscience?
Sure.
Why wouldn't you just stop at those attributes?
Yeah,
instead of
Good question. So do you believe that there is such a thing as a single bachelor?
So basically you're saying the inconsistencies make it impossible for it to exist? I would love for you to give me that one characteristic that shows it doesn't exist.
I would actually backtrack, because if we're talking about specific claims from specific gods, and we're talking about the Christian God.
We're talking specifically about the Christian God.
Right, exactly. So the Christian God has specific claims to its existence and has lots and lots of attributes and things that he has done on earth. For example, there are people who say, I prayed for Drew over here and he has been healed, by the grace of God and this and that. Whereas there's other natural explanations that can cover that, or either that, or there's events that have been described, particularly in scriptures, that have either were misconstrued wildly or just never even happened. And so if that's going to qualify whether or not a God is real, for example, if we're talking about Jesus Christ rising from the dead and that never happened, well, then I'm going to say that, Christianity is at least false in some way. And if there is a God, then he is not the God that's being described in the Bible, or any other kind of Christian conception of him.
Okay, great. So you said if there is a God, he's not the one described in the Bible. So we know that he can still exist even if all the attributes are incorrect, correct?
Well, if he's not the Christian God, then what is he? Right? He's something else.
No, he's a God. He doesn't have to be. My question is, what argument convinced you that the Christian God does not exist? And you can't tell me that the inconsistencies of the attributes are what convinced you that he entirely does not exist. You have to tell me what convinced you that the entity of God does not exist. Not his qualities, not his attributes, not his personality. What about?
But that's what he is. How can you say that we can't use those things if we're not?
Well, you're objecting to that because you know that's as far as your argument goes. You can't take it any farther than we don't think he's benevolent, we don't think he's omnipresent, we don't think he's omniscient. Doesn't mean he didn't create the world. Doesn't mean he did not create the world. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Well, if the Christians claim that God created the world a certain way, and we find out through natural methods that that's actually not true, then I would say that
you hypothesize. You cannot prove
well,
the way that.
Well, let me ask you this: how do you know that you're not hypothesizing about God? What's the difference?
I'm asking you the question.
Sure, but
convince you that God doesn't exist. Does not exist.
Well, let's stick to one topic at a time because
that's the topic.
You're making claims here that you actually know more about the Christian God than I do, or at least there's something about him that you know is true.
No. My question is, what argument convinced you that God does not exist?
Again,
not the attribute.
But
the attribute.
Yeah,
well,
so I think there's confusion because I think we covered this because we're talking about the Christian God.
If someone says Antonio has 2 arms and only have 1 arm, doesn't preclude me from existing. That would be an attribute error, correct?
Well, if
Antonio has blue eyes. Antonio doesn't have blue eyes. He has brown eyes.
Yeah.
Your argument has to convince me that I don't exist.
What if we defined that necessarily Antonio has 2 arms and has blue eyes? What if we define necessarily that is the case? Because isn't that how the Christian God is defined as being omnipresent, omnibenevolent, omniscient?
But he has many attributes, right? He has
those are some of his attributes, and if you show that those don't actually exist or those are nonsensical, then his attributes are nonsensical.
Yeah.
There you go. He has nonsensical attributes. And
well, what you can say is that people have interpreted his attributes incorrectly. Because it can be nonsensical, but it doesn't preclude him from existing.
Okay,
but you have to go as far as showing that he exists in the first place.
Yeah, so humans could be wrong, therefore.
Yeah.
I guess we could be wrong about it, but
is that we could be wrong that he exists. That's your entire argument. That's what you base your life on.
No, I don't. I'm not saying that we could be wrong, and I thought I was just trying to repeat back what I thought that you had said. That, well, you could be wrong about that, so there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the attributes are not, attributes do not make a God, right?
But, okay, if we have wrongful interpretations, let's say every single attribute we know about this God is wrong, then we don't know anything about him, right?
Not necessarily, because with the God label, he still had to be the creator, right? That's the one thing of a God, of the God.
But that's an attribute.
God created everything. Yeah. Creator.
Okay.
You can't.
But let's say. Well, I mean, why does he have to be a creator? Yeah. There are gods that aren't creators all the time.
The only way to get the God attribute, which is the Christian God.
Okay.
That's what we're arguing for.
Right. Okay.
Is to be the creator.
So would you say that if the Christian God, wasn't a creator, if we could demonstrate that there wasn't a Christian God, there wasn't a creator, would that show that the Christian God doesn't actually exist?
Yeah, that would probably be the one attribute that you would need to prove.
Okay, so
God does not have
that one attribute supersedes all of the other attributes that I listed. So basically, if we disprove that attribute, then that will make it to where we can disqualify all the other attributes from defining him into existence. But if I give my attributes, which I think that disprove his existence, no, those are unnecessary.
Yeah.
So why is it being a creator more necessary than being omnipresent, omnibenevolent, like the Bible defines the Christian God to be?
Not that they're not necessary. They're inconsequential to the existence of God. That's the whole point.
Well, I think that a creator God is inconsequential to the existence of God. What if I said that?
Yeah.
Can you prove that? Or can you make a logical argument for that to be the case?
Nope. Can you? For yours?
You just made a nonsensical argument, and you want me to make an argument for the case of the creator God not being the God?
We don't believe in God, so you would have to make the case that the God exists.
No. The whole point is, what argument, I'll repeat the whole argument. What argument convinced you that God does not exist? And what you started with was the incongruent attributes of God. That has nothing to do with the existence of God. We all agree with that.
Existence is an attribute, correct? Can we go there? How about that?
You can. If you go there, can you make it work?
Yeah, I don't see or feel or touch or do anything with God.
So what argument proves that God doesn't exist? That's pretty much
you're kind of arguing backwards.
Yeah, we covered that.
The burden of proof lies on the person making the claim.
Okay. No. I asked you what argument convinced you that the Christian God doesn't exist. You were willing to take on that argument, right?
Yes,
and we did.
We did.
The attributes of omnipresence or omnibenevolence prove that God did not create the world.
That's not what you asked us. God existence, not whether God created the world.
Existence, exactly.
Those are two different things.
You understand this. You understand this. If he is not omnipresent, does that mean he did not create the world?
No, but I'm
perfect.
kind of confused.
Now, exactly.
So what we end up saying here is what it's coming down to is we're saying that all the omnis, if we can show that those are nonsensical, then that means that the Christian God doesn't exist. And he says, no, those are inconsequential to the existence of God. I asked if we could disprove that God was, or there was a creator, then that would disprove the Christian God. And I then asked, why is being a creator more important of an attribute than being omnipresent, being omnibenevolent, all of the other ways that God's described in the Bible? And I haven't gotten an answer on that.
Well, the answer is very simple. He could be malevolent and the creator. He could be non-omnipresent. I don't know what the opposite of omnipresent would be, but he could be local only and still be the creator. He could be not whatever.
Yeah.
Omniscient.
Yeah. Sure. So conceivably, there could be something that we could call God that isn't all of those things, right?
Yes.
Well, you know what? Conceivably, there could be something that's not a creator. We could still call it God, right?
I mean, not if we're going to follow the classical definition of God, which God.
You just made my argument for me. The logical definition of God possesses all those omnis. There you go.
No. You want to get out of this so bad, so desperately, but I just asked if you just pose an argument that convinced you that God doesn't exist.
And I did, and then I used your argument to let you know that you're making a nonsensical argument at this point.
No, you didn't.
Sorry.
You've watched enough Jordan Peterson, because I've watched your videos, to analyze a well-constructed argument and someone who is being disingenuous and dishonest.
But here's the thing.
You've done enough of that analysis.
We can't make the argument that God doesn't exist until we know what that God is. We have to define what that God is first before we can do that.
Christian God.
Okay,
so God. We already established that.
Yes, and so, as we've said before, we'll go through this
argument
one more time here because I don't want to keep going in the loop of the conversations. There are certain attributes, and I would add claims of the existence of the Christian God that we would know that he exists based on things that only he could do that would help us determine, that that's him, that we don't find to be convincing. That, Christians through history have made claims about this God that we just, don't see. Either there's logical consistencies or there's empirically wrong, data about them. Like if we're talking about, there are some Christians that believe God created the earth 6,000 years ago. Well, that doesn't match up with, the data that we have through these other methods. And we find the methods that that we find more convincing, we find them convincing because they're more reliable in showing us other conclusions. So you don't have any arguments that disprove the existence of God. You just have a lot of data that you either disagree with or don't believe.
So not any that satisfy you, given the fact that
I just want to hear your point of view to the point that that you've made
I think you want to hear our point of view from your framework.
Yeah, we've given our point of view.
No.
Yeah.
I would love to hear why you're so convinced that God doesn't exist when 98% of the world, for all of humanity, believes that there is a God and or gods.
Has 98% of humanity ever been wrong about anything?
It doesn't matter.
Yes, it does matter because the consensus doesn't define what's true about reality.
Number one, in this particular case, all of humanity, for nearly all of humanity, all of history,
that's not true.
A God and or God.
Look,
and you have figured out with your limited knowledge,
Antonio,
that there is no God.
Antonio, are Drew and I part of humanity?
Yes,
okay, so all of humanity has not come to the conclusion that God exists. And by the way, using arguments from consensus...
Only 98%.
Okay, well, I will drop you in a second if you don't let me talk. okay?
No problem. The D-bag approach is a great argument.
It's not a D-bag approach, man. I think we've been very... Look, if Matt Dillahunty was here, you'd be gone like 10 minutes ago. All right? Let's be real.
What? His D-bag approach is the worst thing for atheism because we know he's just obfuscated and trying to escape the actual argument.
And I don't think your approach to theism is very good either, so we're just going to let you go and just end the conversation.
Right,
I'm sorry that we had to do that, but...
One tip there, Antonio, is that I would try to keep things from going in multiple circles, because that was about 3, and you asked us what our argument was, we stated what it was, and then you said, no, that doesn't work. Didn't explain why. And then you go back 3 more times to what's your argument, and we gave it to you. And then you switch all of a sudden to another argument at the end? Like, what's your goal there? I don't know. I don't think that the approach is necessarily going to work out very well.
And if you're trying to make us mad, if you're trying to, like, you know, do something to us, I mean, we're used to this now, and we're not trying to, like, sponsor debates on this platform necessarily. We can talk about what our beliefs are and how we got to those conclusions, but you can either accept them or, you know, just disagree with them. I would encourage you to reflect on some of the answers that we gave and some of the answers that other atheists might give to that question and see if that satisfies you. If not, then have a great day.
Also look up special pleading and understand why saying that one thing being more valuable than another for basically no particular reason, not really a great approach.
Yeah. So, but I'm excited for this next call.
Yes.
Because this is our buddy, Craig Reed. Craig.
Oh, no. What's up, guys?
Hey, Craig.
Craig, what's
up? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. How's it going, dude?
I'm really excited for you guys, actually. Is Drew going to be on every week?
No. So Drew is our guest host for this week, but I do want him to come back.
Oh, I'll be back.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Oh, okay. Well, then thank God I called, or thank nothing I called, because...
But you're a Christian. You're allowed to say
You can say that. We're not offended by that.
Yeah. All right, I can say that. I can say that even in the present company. Okay,
yes,
good.
Yes.
So I'm really excited for you guys. I don't know. I got 2 things that I can potentially talk about.
Okay.
Epistemology or anti-theism. And anti-theism, I think we'd agree on a lot of things. So should I start with that? Or what? I don't know.
I don't know.
Your preference.
Either one, Craig. I mean, like, this show is more about examining people's claims and seeing if we can, you know, come to different conclusions about them.
So I'll start out with the epistemology thing, because I think it's I've picked up epistemology from watching you.
You're talking about street epistemology specifically, right?
Well, I'm kind of talking about epistemology in a general sense. So I'll show you where I'm going, and then you tell me. If I were trying, we have the natural, we have the supernatural, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we both agree. As far as we both agree right now, there's no such thing as a valid epistemological warrant to the supernatural. Correct?
Ooh.
Like I've had a faith experience that made me a Christian.
Yes.
Now, if you're going to ask me why I believe what I believe, my answer is going to be by faith, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that, but I'm assuming, yeah, that's what you tell me.
Okay, so I'll break it down for you. So the night I became a Christian, I went to a church. Now, I had a faith experience that night. We both agree on that. And it was a powerful one.
I would agree that you describe it as a faith experience. Yeah.
Right, that's what I mean. You think I had you don't think I'm lying. You think I had an actual experience,
yeah,
right?
I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was a powerful enough experience that I became a Christian that night, more or less. I mean, with some struggles and I don't think I was 100% committed that night, but I was really, really on board right from the jump.
Sure.
And now the experience, to me, subjectively speaking, was real. Like, I maintain that was a real experience that actually occurred in the real world, that the God that I met that night exists in fact. Now, you would be in the same place, and you might not have the same experience. So there's a part of the experience that's subjective. So you could be in the same room, same night, and be like, you know what, Craig, I'm just not feeling it. You know, I appreciate that you're, and everyone's like, praise Jesus, hallelujah. And you and Drew are like, it's just not happening, Craig. Sorry, I'm not feeling it. So in other words, I'm trying to circle the square. Traditional apologetics is trying to answer how I can get that that was a real experience that occurred without using the faith bridge. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, how do I go? And there's not an answer for this necessarily yet. That's why I wanted to talk to the epistemologists. Do you see where
We're the
what I'm pointing out?
epistemologists. I like that. Yeah.
Yes, my two resident epistemologists.
Okay.
By the
I
way,
think
you can watch
every
these guys
philosophy
both on
school in
interviews
America
and
might not give us that credit.
We're hobbyists.
Yeah,
as far as
hobbyists.
epistemology
Let's do
goes.
that. Yeah.
But, you know.
So how if I were trying to prove using the things that you guys want, evidence, because I've looked up like Alvin Plinchana, I think that's his name, and the other guy, William Rain Clegg, and they basically do a scam sort of apologetics. They say that it's something that is more than faith, how they maintain that it was a real experience by God. But then
I just
when
want to
they
point out a
start talking
Christian
about it,
pastor is calling other Christian apologists scam artists here, like live on this atheist radio. It's really great.
That's why I really like Craig.
Yeah.
Well, because that's why I like you guys too, because you're honest. I mean, you're not trying to all of a sudden move me off the conversation either.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
the point is, I'm telling you that I think something real happened.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They think something real happened too, but when you try to get a real answer from them, they're basically saying faith and then trying to dance around using scientific sounding language, but not actual logic.
Yeah.
Now, how do I build that bridge? Let's start from that. Is there a way?
How do you build the bridge
how would you
in order to get
start?
logically to God?
Facts. What's that?
And like build a bridge like to get logically to God, like an actual real working apologetic that proves God kind of thing?
Well, let's assume for argument's sake that I'm not insane. And that really happened to me, and it wasn't a delusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can you possibly, and this is a real question, like this is actually, how can I, like if I hit my head with a hammer and I have an experience of pain, that's a subjective experience.
Yes.
How can I possibly give you a warrant for a subjective experience? Is there anything that you can see that can...
We can still measure.
How do you even start?
We can measure subjective experiences, including pain. We can see the physical processes that happen when pain occurs in the body. If you get smashed by a hammer, there are nerves that get hit and they go up to your brain and signal this thing to you. And we can all look at that through using the tools that we have. Now, when it comes to God claims, at least the interpretations of those claims, we either don't have those tools or they're described in such a way to where they can't be examined in the first place.
Right, because there's a problem. There's a chasm between the experience, the facts of the experience that we both agree on.
Yeah, like I won't doubt. Drew and I will never doubt that you had an experience.
Oh yeah, I mean, Craig, and you know that I've had them myself, right? I mean, we've talked about that extensively. We've all had them.
What it comes down to is the interpretation of those experiences and what is the most likely explanation or for the cause of those experiences, whether it's something supernatural or something natural.
Right, but the problem with the problem is deeper than on both sides of the issue, because just because they're like with Drew's faith experience that he talked about, there are ways to explain it in the natural, but that doesn't automatically limit the supernatural.
You're right,
and it doesn't limit where it gets really, really confusing or complicated or potentially very interesting. Is the guy who called before who was talking about an energy field. That's how I used to perceive, like, there's a lot of Eastern mysticism where they talk about God in a much more vague, probably scientifically plausible way, to tell you God's honest truth. You know, like, God is more of like a life force that floats through everything that we can connect to through love.
Yes. So let me summarize here, because you're talking about this problem of the demarcation between the natural and the supernatural, right? Between what we can justify natural and supernatural explanations. And this is what I would say to that. If we're talking about the extent of our total experiences, and we know that for the majority of everything I've ever done ever has a natural explanation to it, and we have another event that could possibly, there is the possibility for a supernatural explanation. We have to, look at the probability, right? Okay, well, most of my experiences are natural, so there's that. But that still does not preclude the supernatural explanation. So what else do you look for? Well, if it is a supernatural explanation, then there should be some background information that supports that. So, and for Christians, it's, oh, I had this thing happen to me too, right? And so, like, that's how people kind of confirm these experiences. But if we look, like, worldwide, globally at the human experience, Christian experiences only ever happen pretty much when people have been in contact with other Christians. For example, Aborigines, for the entirety existence before, like, Christian people came to them, have never described experiences of Jesus Christ specifically, or any of the Abrahamic faiths. And you can say the same thing about natives here in the United States and South America and all kinds of places. So there's not a global explanation or mechanism to these experiences. Instead, they'll take their own religious interpretations of those experiences. And you know what? They have just the same amount of problem as you do with the Christian ones, as far as how you can determine what's true and what's not. So we instead come to the conclusion and say, well, a natural explanation is probably the most, it has the best explanatory power, because we're all people and we all exist in nature. And, you know, it doesn't, the experiences described do not have the same consistency that they should if they come from the same source.
Ultimately, natural explanations for supernatural phenomena are objectively plausible because they've been objectively demonstrated to exist.
Right.
But we can't necessarily say that supernatural explanations for such experiences are more plausible or as plausible, because they can't necessarily be demonstrated because of the logical gap between our reason and what could be defined as supernatural.
Right, but if we broaden the term supernatural to just mean like outside of the natural, greater than the natural, and we sort of water it down a little, now we have this guy talking about an energy field that connects all of life, and he's talking about as a God, right? Or that's a possible, because before I was a Christian, okay, I thought of God, and I started to become intellectually convinced that there was a God. But I defined God as life, the totality of life. I defined it very vaguely, and a lot of people do. And when people are praying, okay, there's in other words, there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. It's a lot more complicated than both you and I, and I'm not saying you guys are doing anything wrong. You, the atheist, and me, the Christian, it's a lot more complicated than either of us are giving it credit for, because people are having these varieties of religious experiences all over the world. But there are thematic similarities in all of them, and there are things that people are working out that are similar culture to culture.
So again,
through these experiences,
I think I would clarify, because people are having experiences, but their interpretations of those experiences is what's differing. Because
those are all over the place.
Yes, one extra thing is my interpretation of gravity and the mathematics that I can do behind it is pretty much going to happen because it just does. Like, it has a lot of predictive power to it. So if we're looking for the best explanation for, like, your experience, for example, what has the most predictive power in that scenario? Is it that all of Christianity and its history is true, regardless of, by the way, having a Christian lens to it is already implying a lot of background assumptions. You're implying that, if you're taking a specifically Christian lens, you're implying very specific claims about, like, a man named Jesus and what he did 2,000 years ago and how he interacts with people and how the universe works.
I'm talking about it. I'm not going there in this conversation. I'm talking about it in the loosest possible definition of the term.
Well,
God, theist, once you start nailing it down to specifics, okay.
If it's supernatural, the evidence, the standard of evidence needs to be higher. And that's what I think would convince us, because anecdotal evidence is not sufficient enough for me or Drew to be convinced that your experience was that of, a Christian one.
Yeah.
Right. I guess I'm trying to separate, and I'm trying to hear you guys bounce it back with me.
Yeah.
Because what I'm trying to separate clearly is intellectual conviction that there is a God, which actually could be rooted in evidence, a little bit different than evidence as you perceive it, but still evidence, empirically observable, psychological, sociological evidence, and a faith experience which cannot be rooted in evidence. It's, by definition, it's miraculous, and in order for you to believe me, I either got to do a miracle or give you a miracle experience or see into the future or something like that. Correct? Those are two separate things.
I would say that experiencing something supernatural, just the supernatural and our reason evidence-based world, they're two separate things. Yeah, I think I get where you're coming from.
Right, but the reason evidence-based isn't actually, there is a potential supernatural, a bridge to the supernatural in reason evidence-based. That's kind of where Peterson, the page that Peterson is on now, which is not that dissimilar from where Sam Harris is. They're both kind of batting around with the same things. I don't know exactly how to describe it best for this conversation, but there are two, like if I say to you, Jesus rose from the dead, then you say, well, that's an extraordinary claim. That requires extraordinary proof or evidence.
Yes.
I get that. That's a faith.
It's also an empirical claim, though. It's not just a faith-based claim, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yes, I'm telling you this actually happened, and you need to believe me. So what's your first thing as an atheist? You say, well, give me a good reason to believe you.
Well, because
I either got to do a miracle.
No. You don't have to do a miracle to show that Jesus Christ rose from the dead.
Well, I think he's just saying that to prove a faith experience.
Right. Well, to prove a faith experience, again, we're looking for background information that can, and it depends on, like, the claim. Like we said, like, Jesus Christ rising from the dead seems to be something we can empirically observe. So we would use a different set of tools for that. Again, like, I don't think the problem is... I think the problem is more, like I said, the interpretation of what's the most likely or best likely explanation for the event, not necessarily because with the Jesus thing, it's whether the event actually happened or not. What you're talking about with yourself is this event happened, this experience happened. What is the best explanation for the causes of those experiments? Which is a little bit different.
It's a little bit different, but there are similarities with religious experience. They vary widely when you get down to the specifics of the doctrines of faith.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of similarities with actual faith experiences, and there's a lot of mysteries in there that we don't fully understand.
Yeah.
That's all I'm trying to point. That's all I'm talking about, really.
So are you kind of proposing? And I know you, Craig. I know that you're not saying like, oh, this is just this hard proof that this is the bridge between subjective supernatural experiences and and evidence. Or an evidence-based ideology. I know you're not saying like this is definitely it, but are you hypothesizing?
No, I'm saying there is a potential for a bridge there that has not been discovered or intuited by science or the apologists. The apologists could have solved the question if they were just doing apologists that actually worked. That was like, because it should work. If I'm doing a logical proof that God exists, okay, both of you are honest enough that if I were actually logically proving God exists, guess what? You would agree.
Yeah.
You would go, yes.
Assuming we were rational,
yeah, but I'm talking about you two specifically, or Steve McRae, or someone like that, or Shannon. Shannon would agree.
Yeah. Oh,
Shannon's reasonable. So she would disappear for a week or two, and she'd go, this really upends my atheism, but this is actually true, and I can't see the flaw in it.
If we were being honest.
Yeah, it'd probably take a little bit, but sure.
Because I changed my mind once. I can at least probably do it again. And that's hard enough for some people just to do it the one time.
I hope I would change it again. Yeah.
So.
Well, I think both of you would. And I think that's the real avenue. Because most of the apologetics of the past are, like I said, scam apologetics. And I'm not trying to diss anybody, but they don't convince because they're not doing what they claim. You are saying provide evidence, real world, concrete, empirically observable evidence. And they're saying, we did, look, and then they try to scam you when they're just telling you what I'm telling you. I had a faith experience one night, really powerful faith experience. I'm convinced God is real. You all agree with me, or you both agree with me. But when you say, prove it to me or demonstrate it to me, I can't yet.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? There's an intellectual problem that needs to be solved.
So you're thinking, maybe there's going to be a bridge there, but kind of maybe by showing through anthropology or psychology that there is this commonality to these religious experiences, maybe it will end up being that you'll be able to say, hey, no, I now have evidence that this was a real supernatural experience. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
That's exactly what I'm getting at.
Okay.
There's a potential bridge through the commonality of religious experience with the sociological evidence that some religions are better than others. That's why I was going to bring up anti-theism.
Yeah.
Some religions are more, like you would never object to a religion. You guys don't object to the way I practice my Christianity, correct? I mean, it's not invasive.
With some of the logical stuff, you know, you know that we don't see on the same lines. But as far as the way that you affect other people and conduct yourself, and maybe the way that I know that at least the way that you vote, we agree a lot. But yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, yeah, I don't find your Christianity offensive like that.
Yeah,
you know, I'm not calling you a jihadist or anything.
As far as actions go, yeah. But your beliefs and your actions are very, very different, Craig, from the majority of Christians that both of us certainly know. And
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, I think you may not see it that way, but it's a good thing, but also a problem. Because if you're able to find so much common ground with us, and if you're able to have these conversations with us, then, like, and if all the other Christians were like you, then Christianity... Here's the thing. No, I'm not saying you'd be atheist, but Christianity wouldn't be the same Christianity anymore. Right? I would say that your version of Christianity is a liberal one. And I'm saying that we mean that as a good thing, but also in that it's not the standard. And that's kind of the problem. And that's why we have this show like this, because we want to raise the standard, first of all, the standard of evidence for people to come to the conclusions of their claims, but also just to have the conversation in general that, hey, maybe this thing that we believe like isn't true. And like, what are the ramifications of that? And how can we be sure? So, you know, like it doesn't really happen a lot in Christian circles. In fact, if anything, it's the opposite. It's saying, oh,
well, because you were raised Christian, there's incentive not to deviate from groupthink. Correct?
Yes. Yeah.
I was not raised Christian, so I don't even know what the sacred cows are in Christianity because I wasn't raised in them. I'm taking Christianity from, you know, boy meets God,
right?
Then has his own faith experience with the Bible, and it's deeply idiosyncratic and deeply personal.
Yes,
it does match up with a lot of the traditional teachings. Not all, but some, or a good chunk.
I know for a fact though that Drew and I know Christians who would say that you're not a Christian.
Oh man, yeah, no, I don't think that anyone I grew up with would necessarily consider you a Christian. Yeah, even just because you're a Democrat.
Yeah, well, that's part of it too.
Just because of what? Like,
just because you're a Democrat.
I think that's
that's just a joke.
That's a geographic problem.
Well, my wife is on it. I mean, she's one of those more like, you know, tripped out, you know, conservative Christians. But I don't know. Yeah, I agree.
Well, Craig,
there's a lot of people.
We've been having this conversation for a long time. We want to start wrapping things up here, but I do want to say thank you so much for calling, and I hope that you can call in again.
Yeah, for sure.
I hope you got something from this conversation. I think it is an interesting thing to talk about. And I'm glad that you are at least willing. I mean, props to you for talking about your experiences and be like, maybe this isn't true. Like, what do you guys think about this?
Craig is honest.
Yeah.
That's what I want people to realize. Like, there are Christians out there, there are religious people out there. They're being honest about it. I mean, we may not agree, but Craig is an example to religious people, I think, of honesty. And so,
so props to you. Craig.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this more maybe on your channel some other time. But yeah, thanks for calling, man.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have you, after you do the show for a couple of weeks, I'll have you both back on.
Cool.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Well, you take care, Craig.
I just want to say really quick that Craig he's a kind of friend of mine through the Twitter sphere, and I've been on his channel. He just does like some fun live streams, and yeah, he's a Christian guy. He grew up kind of a punk badass, the kind of guy that I wanted to be when I was a little scrawny Christian kid in my Baptist upbringing. But yeah, you know, like he talked about how he converted to Christianity, and he's just a cool, kind of honest guy that's fun to talk to, and the fact that he says that apologists are largely scam artists really takes you aback. It makes me
rare thing. It's a rare thing, especially it's someone in his position because he is a pastor, right?
I'm not really sure.
Oh, I know he works in church congregation.
Yeah, I know that he tries to spread the gospel.
Yes,
and him saying what he says there, that takes a lot of balls.
Yes, so props to that. And again, the emphasis on here is to just have these conversations in the first place because, I mean, Lord knows that there's so many people, like, I know when I was a Christian, I, like, didn't want, especially after I had my conversation with Anthony, I didn't want to talk to other atheists.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to, like, figure stuff out on my own. And, of course, that meant looking up atheist sources and things, but...
That's how you found me.
Yes, that is how I found you. That's another story. But it's a process that sometimes when we approach these conversations, we're just like, no, but you're not seeing it. Like, you're just not getting there, and we want someone to be where we're at. But we don't often recognize that how we got to where we are was like, at least for me, it was a journey.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't just a thing I figured out in a day.
Yeah.
So the fact that we can have conversations about that, I think, is progress in some way, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, man, we are getting really, really, really close to 7:30. And we have a full line of callers.
We do.
And I think we can go a little bit longer tonight. How about 7:45, folks? 7:45? Let's do it. Okay. Yes. That's the audience I like to see.
I will be on my Discord later probably talking about this because I have a long drive back to DFW.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, man, we have a couple different choices here. I think we should go with John. John from Ohio, you were on air. What's up?
Yes, I am here. I am glad they're talking with you guys.
Yes, we're glad you're talking with us.
Yes, because my son is same age of you, and I am 73 years old.
Cool.
And I am atheist, and he's Baptist, and he's Baptist, and he's a preacher.
Interesting.
Oh, wow. And we always fight. We always fight. And I want to say for sure there is no God.
Oh, yeah. So we have in your notes here, you want to talk about the belief that there is no God.
No God, because always I ask him, my son, where is the God?
Yeah.
He doesn't have place for him.
Yeah.
I said, tell me, where is the God? He says, all over. I says, who made all over? He says, he did. I asked him where he was when he made all over. He doesn't have answer.
Yeah. So I think the problem is sometimes...
They should have place.
Yeah.
But it says, in the beginning there was nothing. Means God was nothing himself.
Yeah.
Where he was, is nothing.
So let me stop you here.
There was nothing where he was himself.
Because I think maybe a better approach, if you're trying to have these conversations...
He doesn't exist, right? He was in nothing.
So...
Nothing means zero.
I'm going to mute you for just a second because we're trying to talk here. But if you are listening, I hope you are, there could be a problem when talking to people of different faiths.
Yeah.
Because we try to throw these syllogisms out there. With these logical arguments, or we try to show some sort of paper or something that says, oh, look, this says that your belief in young earth creation is total bunk. And cognitively as human beings, that's hard for us to ingest. So the way that we like to approach having those kinds of conversations is, one is kind of like a street epistemology method, which is just asking questions about their belief and making sure that we have a full understanding, and then asking questions about how we can verify that the belief is true. And that takes an individual contextual basis and is a lot longer sometimes, as evidenced tonight. When you have those kinds of conversations, it's not just a quick point 1, point 2, therefore point 3.
Yeah.
And it's not natural per se, because we want to kind of sink our teeth into it, but it can prove to be a lot more effective sometimes.
Yeah, and one thing is that I don't think a lot of people realize is when you learn a little bit about psychology, you realize that there's more to believing something, especially very foundational, than just the logical parts of it. I mean, it's like Craig talked about just now, is that it goes beyond, for a lot of people, it's not just I have this evidence-based reason to believe in God. There's a faith reason. It's kind of an emotional, instinctive, intuitive reason to believe. And most of the time, that's a lot stronger. That's what you have to end up overcoming. And you can't overcome that for another person. People have to overcome that on their own. I mean, I think for both of us, we really, really didn't want to be atheists. I mean, we seriously didn't.
Isn't that interesting?
And the thing is, one barrier got knocked down. A lot of the reasonable, logical aspect of it. But then eventually we realized we had to let go of this emotional attachment because we didn't have a reason to be clinging to God anymore. And
well, we didn't have a reason that we found to be satisfactory,
right.
I would say.
Yeah, and it takes a lot longer, I think, to break down that emotional barrier, that emotional connection, than it does something logical. And the fact that you're a father and son having this conversation adds a whole other element to that, making it very, very difficult. The number one thing I would say there is that, you know, like, I don't want to give advice to someone who, like, is my elder and probably knows a lot more about this stuff than I do.
You have a degree in psychology.
I do, but
you can talk about that.
But speaking from personal experience, the number one thing that I want to know and hear from my dad, and I'm sure that you already do this, is that, you know, we have love for each other. And, you know, my dad makes sure that every time he sees me that he says, I love you, I'm proud of you, and I'm super, super lucky to have that. And I'm sure that your son, you know, is in the same boat. And so just for anybody listening that's in that same situation, I want to put that advice out there. But ultimately, I don't think anything productive is going to come out of this reasonable conversation if there's an emotional barrier there.
Yes.
So I think the number one priority is the emotional connection that you have to your son and making sure that you have a mutual trust, even though you have disagreements. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting about these things all the time and always arguing. And at the end of the day, remember, neither one of you believe in Islam, and you can always laugh at that instead. That's what my dad and I do.
Whoa. Whoa. I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess that's true, but also...
Not Muslims, but Islam itself.
Yes, yes. Let's make that distinction real quick.
Yeah.
Drew does not represent the ACA in any official capacity.
Is it controversial to say that?
I don't know. People. Anyway, yeah, I think the most important thing is before you even decide you want to have a conversation about this is that you kind of validate your identity as a father to your son. And, you know, first, because like Drew was saying, these can be kind of emotional issues. And I think that it's an act of love that you want to engage with your son about these issues.
Yeah.
Because that says that you care about him enough to where you think that, from your perspective, that they should know better and that they're capable of doing that. Because I wouldn't talk to, at least I don't think I would try to talk to somebody that I don't think could change their mind about anything or who doesn't care about the truth, because that's a waste of time on our part. But the fact that, one, that you even are having these conversations is a good thing. Don't let that fool you. But I would say, as far as your approach, you know, just like examine yourself and see what you want to get out of these conversations, because more than likely it's not going to be a single conversation or even two or three that's going to completely change their deeply held beliefs. It's going to be a series of conversations, a series of experiences, a series of research, probably, if it's really deeply held, especially if they're in official capacity at a religious organization. So it's something you have to consider. There's a lot of contextual elements that go into that. But, you know, that doesn't mean stop trying. You know, keep at it. You never know what kind of seeds you can plant in people and see what grows from there. So hope that helps, John. That was an interesting call.
It'll never be a waste of time to show love to your family.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so the next call that I have here is from Chuck. Chuck, are you there?
I'm here.
Cool. What's up, Chuck? How's it going?
I would like to document from the Holy Bible that God is not omniscient and not omnipotent.
Okay.
And then I would like to prove that with the Bible, that the Bible is not the Holy Bible. It's not a Holy Bible.
So just so you know, we are atheists, right? So you know, like, we kind of agree with you on that.
Yes.
Okay. So is this just a case test, and you want us to kind of like see if we think the argument is valid? Or
I opened with the screener was one of the things that I had, and he said that's common knowledge. And I've been a religionist all my life, and I've never heard anybody defend the four things that the four things that I wanted to talk about. But he said the first thing that I talked about is common knowledge. So I'm not going to talk about that.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk about the other things.
So you're saying that these four beliefs that you have give you the confidence to believe that there is no God, like that is your claim, or no Christian God?
No, this was part of the steps that took me to the fact that, I mean, becoming an atheist from a religionist guy like me was a long step, a long process. It was many years. I first of all realized that I didn't think Jesus Christ ever existed, that I thought he was just created at the Council of Nicaea. And then as I went farther along, looking at history and looking at religion, I then come to I would cross the Rubicon to say that God doesn't even exist.
Okay, so you are making the claim that God doesn't exist.
Well, yes, in the Bible.
Okay, like the biblical God does not exist.
No, the biblical God does not exist.
Okay.
That's my belief, but that's not what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you with the Bible that the God is not omnipotent and not omniscient.
It's not that I'm not necessarily interested in your argument. I'm just wondering if it's appropriate for the show.
It is.
Because
it's in the Bible. Your listeners who believe in this Bible can go to the Bible and read this and say, you know, that's right.
Yeah.
And
I'm not sure because, I mean, none of us here are using the Bible as our claim for knowing that anything is true. And I'm sure that there's people that are listening that might find it interesting, but I think for the purposes of the show, I'm not sure that it really kind of falls into what we're trying to do here. But this isn't like a showcase for, personal stuff, unless you want us to examine and maybe critique the arguments or see what we can get out of it. But
well, I wouldn't mind hearing that, that this is common knowledge among the atheists, because this is stuff that I have discovered myself. And I've been in religion, all different religions, all my life, and I've never heard these things defended.
Well, I think if you wanted to hear more people talk about that, you can go on the ACA Discord, and they might be interested in hearing those kinds of conversations. But I'm just letting you know, for the purposes of this show, I'm not sure that it really qualifies. But thank you for calling, though. And I hope if you do have a claim that you want us to kind of examine in the future, you can call us up. Or, there's other guys that have shows, too, like Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience, and they have...
You can always tweet at us and all that kind of stuff and get our criticism and our ideas there.
But I appreciate the call, though. They hung up. Okay. So we have... Oh, okay. Well, I'm just getting told now that we're actually out of time and we can't take another caller. But I hope you guys really enjoyed our first official episode of Truth Wanted. This was a really fun time for me.
I think this was interesting.
Yeah. So what's going to happen now is we're going to do another show on our regular time at 6 o'clock on Fridays. That's where I'm going to get my friend Josh Turner as a co-host, and he's going to be co-hosting with me remotely, and that's going to be really fun. But you can also check us out again next Sunday, where my good buddy Anthony Magnabosco is going to be co-hosting with me, and that's going to be really fun. But you need to check all this out on the Truth Wanted YouTube channel. So right now we're streaming from Atheist Experience channel, but you need to go to Truth Wanted to get that. And we we'll be putting it on Spreaker, as well as the audio form of that, so you can check us out there. And we will be having some other clips from previous episodes and stuff up in the next couple days and weeks as well. So be sure to check those out. And we also officially have a Patreon. So if you really like what you see here and you want to support the show more, you should definitely check us out there. Drew, where should people find you?
I am Genetically Modified Skeptic on Facebook and YouTube. YouTube's my main gig. I'm also at GM_skeptic on Twitter. I also have a Discord link in the description of any of my videos. If you want to talk to me there, I will be on there tonight.
Yes, and you can find me on Drew's Discord as well. I'm also on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan, and we have a Truth Wanted Facebook group as well. And if you want to email me and you have something you want to say, the email address for that is truth@atheist-community.org. And I'd love to hear what you think about the show, what you want to see more of, what kind of guests you want to see me talk to. But until then, keep wanting the truth, guys. Thanks for joining us.